Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another trek, the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We're on volume 18, chapter 4. What a very uncomfortable set of chapters. I find this is going to be the Mushoku Monday of uncomfortableness. Andrew dancing around topics, and I'm not going to dance around it like I'm not going to talk about it, but I have to choose my wording. I have to choose my wording, unfortunately, but it is what it is. That's Mushoku Tensei. But anyways, yeah, thanks everybody that dropped by for the premiere. Hey chat, hope you guys are doing well. Thank you everybody that drops by for the VOD later on. I'm including you guys as well. Thanks everybody that supports the channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. Just hitting the like button is a way to support the channel if you can't do the other stuff. We had Kusha last week, did another super. Thank you so much. Nicholas with a massive amount of gifted memberships and a super. Sization with some gifted as well. We ended up getting 2 new emotes. Thank you so much. I hate having to, for those that don't know, YouTube gives you a certain amount of emotes based on your memberships, but they don't take them away. So yeah, if you lose memberships, you have to kind of build back up to get the next tier. And it's a pain in the butt because every time a next chapter we do a Mushoku Monday, I'm trying to get the emotes in there that'll actually be characters in the Mushoku Monday. So you have people going, where's this emote? Where's this emote? I love the new Zenith one. The new Zenith one and the new Norn one are really good. I don't want to take them off ever. But yeah, that's a thing. It's just a thing. One of these days, I just need to like find which currency is the cheapest and just buy a whole bunch just to unlock all the memberships, emotes, and then be done with it. But it's an ongoing struggle. I don't want to undo it. We'll just continue the ongoing struggle to unlock them all. But again, really appreciate the support. It means a lot to me. You guys are so amazing to keep this going, keep us down this trail until we eventually finish it, which may be never. Just going to drag it out as long as possible. I didn't really have too much to talk about that I missed last week. The only thing that came to mind was as I was editing last Mushoku Monday, one thing kind of popped up in my head that I don't know if it's going to be a thing. This could just be me overthinking things, which I like to do. But yeah, it was interesting that Rudius said specifically with the whole situation with Fam, is that he was told by Orsted to go to this village, use detoxification magic to save the village chief's son, and kill the evil dragon thing. But then it shifts to, oh, but Fam's already gone, and I have to go save her. So he ends up, okay, so there's 2 tasks here. Save the chief's village son, and don't let Fam die. There's technically 3. Don't let Fam die and kill the dragon. Now, what happens instead? He ends up finding this other girl with her and brings them both back. He killed the dragon. So that part was done. Brings it back. And then he leaves. That's the interesting thing that kind of popped in my head. Again, I'm not sure if I'm overthinking this. Is he leaves. So he's assuming that this girl is going to save the chief village son. So the question mark does remain, obviously, is what's the important thing about that whole scenario? Obviously Fam's a big part of it. But the assumption there is that Fam was supposed to get with the chief's village son because, again, that's the 2 variables that he wants to make sure survive, along with killing the dragon. But what happens? He leaves. He doesn't detoxification the village chief. In the end, Angie saves the village chief's son. So in essence, that part does get completed, but he's not there to see, unless he observes it and like make sure that something happens to save him, like to be more hands-off. But it's interesting that he literally left before that one objective was even done, which again implies that Fam was supposed to get with the village chief's son and maybe have a child. Now, it could just be that Fam has to survive and then she's going to do something, but the assumption there is that the 2 of them, since it's a male and female, that they're going to get eventually together and they're going to have a child, and that's what actually creates some sort of variable for later on. So again, it's one of those things where I'm like, I wonder if later on Ors is going to be like, you were supposed to do this. Why'd you do that? Because now Angie is with Dolchel and not Fam. Fam ended up leaving or something like that, and then that child was never born. It is one of those things because of that butterfly effect that they've kind of established with what he's doing with saving lives and stuff, and how that's supposed to do something else, that he literally didn't do the job. He literally left it undone and left. And it still, again, the people still survive, but it sort of implies that, now, Fam could still get with Dolchel. It could still technically be a thing, but it doesn't technically say that in that chapter. It quickly goes to Angie saves, they get married, skip forward. So it's like a very random thought that popped in my head that it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting. But anyways, let's jump into Chapter 4, Research Progress. Lately, Rudius had gotten used to seeing Cliff with his eye patch. Elise had made it for him, stitching his initials, and there was something imposing about it. He lacked muscle and height like Ghislaine, but the vibe was similar enough. It's so funny because that was one of those kind of semi-spoilers that I seen at some point. I remember when I was doing one of the tier lists, and it hadn't got to the part where he got the demon eye yet. And in the tier list, one of the images that I got from Mal had Cliff with an eye patch. And when I was doing the tier list, I didn't even think anything of it. Honestly, I literally didn't even think anything of the eye patch. And then somebody's like, oh my gosh, spoiler in the picture. He's got an eye patch. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess that is. It's one of those moments where you don't even think about it. It's just not until somebody points it out that suddenly it becomes a spoiler. But at the time, I'm like, okay, so he's going to lose an eye. And to be fair, when it came to that point where they went out to see Kishirika and he got the eye, the entire time that whole scenario was playing out, I'm like, oh crap, something's going to happen where like Cliff is going to get shot in the eye or something like that and lose his eye. No, he literally got a demon eye. So it wasn't technically a spoiler because I didn't know what the eye patch was for. So it's one of those interesting things. And proof that it's not spoiler until you point it out. Cliff had apparently met the 3 new first years during homeroom and muttered about it. Now that Ariel left, we have the first prince's son. I can already sense trouble in the horizon. Unlike Ariel, I think more or less he's a hostage. So try to be nice to him, please. He's so young. He doesn't deserve to be caught up in his father's battles. Yeah, I guess. Well, I'll warn them against trying anything against your little sister at least. Thank you. Elise was nowhere to be seen, off somewhere with her child. She birthed countless kids over the course of centuries, but her child with Cliff was particularly special to her, and she was handling it with utmost care. With her experience, she was sure to raise Clive to be an outstanding man. This is one of those oddities in... Yes, I initially, when the child was first born, I initially went to that mode of like, oh my gosh, this is the one that's going to actually be special to her. With all the other kids, it's literally raising them to the point where they're efficient, basically, they're self-sustaining, and then she leaves them. Raising them just enough that they can take care of themselves. And it's kind of an assumption that you create here that this is different, and this is the one that she's going to handle it with utmost care. Like, even how he puts it, he almost puts it in a way of like, she's birthed all these kids, but this one is special to her, and she's handling it with utmost care. That's the assumption. What's to say that every child that she has ever had, she handled them with care? Because again, initially, when we first learned about Elise and how she was going around and sleeping with everybody, it implied there that yes, she was having kids here and there and there and here and there, but the thing that impressed me was that she was making sure the child was going to be able to take care of itself before she left. She wasn't just going, oh, it came out. I guess I'll put it over here. Bye, kid. No, she was taking care of it to an extent. Now, you can say she wasn't raising them until they were adults, and she may have left them too early. My assumption is that she was raising them to the point where they were at least in their teens, to a point where they could handle things themselves, they could get a job, they could do this or that. So she was raising them to the point where they can be self-sufficient, but nothing indicated to me that she didn't care for them. That's the key thing. Now, I think the big difference here is that, yes, obviously this was going to be special, because this is with somebody that she actually loves, not just a rando adventurer or something like that she managed to get pregnant, and then she had to take care of the kid, birth it out and everything like that. So there is obviously a difference here. This is going to be a child that she probably wants to watch. She's not going to leave. That's the key thing. She's not just going to leave it. But again, nothing says that she never cared for the others. Just that she didn't hang around. So it's kind of an upsetting thing, in my opinion. After Cliff retrieved 3 wooden boxes from his room, they set out from the campus completely. Their destination was the outskirts of the city. So they hopped on a carriage outside the school and rode to the city gates. How is young Clive doing? He's doing great. He cries at night, though. And he does demand a lot of my attention. Reminds me of my own childhood. That's right, you were raised in an orphanage, weren't you? Yeah, a lot of the kids were abandoned by their parents. But there's something special about looking after your own kid. Agreed. You sure are impressive, Master Cliff. You become a proper father. I'm not a proper anything. It only looks like I'm doing a good job because Lisa's handling everything. Yeah, but compared to you, I don't even pitch in with child rearing once a month. Raising a child comes in many forms. In your case, you have wives and a maid to help out, and you're doing what's required of you. There's no reason for you to feel bad for not being more involved. Dang, Cliff's a good guy, dude. Cliff's trying to reassure Rudius. It does note right here, Cliff was speaking as if he could already guess what was bugging Rudius. And again, that goes to Cliff's favor. He is somebody that he does listen to a lot of confessions. And I think there's an aspect of listening to confessions that you get to know how people kind of tick. It's almost like a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist, obviously hitting the books for so long, learning about the psychological process of people's minds. Eventually, they can learn how to get information from people and how to help them sort of cope with that information, how to settle it in their own minds. And I think Cliff, again, technically doing something similar through Confessions, which I think almost in a case does the same thing. He is learning how people think. He probably knows body language and whatnot and what Rudius is going through. Plus, he knows Rudius. Rudius is his friend. But this is like one of those kind of really good moments of his kind of supporting Rudius in a way, helping him because he obviously knows that this is something that bugs Rudius. But I think Cliff, more than anybody else, and a lot of people anyways, he's going to understand what Rudius is trying to do. That he doesn't really have a choice and that he's doing what he can do. I think that's the important thing. We always, not in all cases, can you always be there for somebody? Whether it's your child, your significant other, your friend, whatever it is. You can't always be there, but at least showing that you're there when you can be is important. And in Rudius' case, he's trying to be there when he can because he can't always be there. Because he's having to do the training, he's having to do the jobs, and it's all for the sake of saving and protecting his family. So, and I think Cliff sees that, and he's trying to reassure him. Not to say that Rudius is, number one dad. Definitely not number one dad, in my opinion. But he's definitely doing far above and beyond what really most any dad would do. There's a lot of dads that in this situation, they'd be like, out of here. Let the man God kill them. I don't care about them that much. From my perspective, you're the one who's got it the roughest, since you don't get to be there every day and watch them as they grow. Hearing those words from revered Father Cliff himself comes to great relief. Indeed, should you ever feel the need to confess your sins, you need to only come to me. Kidding, of course. He's got to slip that in there. It does really feel like Cliff is... Now, this is kind of one of those positive natures of religion in itself, but this is showing it with Cliff, is that there's a lot of people that get really into religion. And I think there's like two different groups, and there's one group where it's like they just have to constantly tell you, you need to follow these rules. If you're not following these rules, I can't be with you. And they push anybody that is sinful out of their minds and pushes them away because they're so dead set on everybody has to follow these rules that I see in here. And there is the other side of it that's kind of more apt to sort of bend and not to be focused on pushing people away, but rather embracing them and then showing them, hey, there's this right here in case you want it. I'm not going to tell you how to follow the rules that I see here. Just let me know when you want help. And then, yes, when that comes to that point, you can say, hey, do you want to look at this? It's sort of a passive love versus a, fire and brimstone love, really is what it is. And I think Cliff, early on, felt like he was that fire and brimstone. And even with, like, a lot of the cases that he ran into, like when he first brought Roxy back, Cliff immediately went that whole mode of, like, women aren't like your toys and all that kind of stuff. They're not Pokemon, you have to collect them all, even though he got all the starter Pokemon. And he's kind of transitioned slowly to even more so just being there to support Rudius and being a friend. And yes, now where he even jokes about it, which is cute. Cliff had passed the exam to be recognized as a priest of Milis. Apparently it wasn't an official thing, but it afforded him certain status while at the church. It wasn't as if his research preoccupied every minute of his time. Rudius wondered if Cliff was considering what would happen when he returned to his homeland. Currently, he was a 7th year, so he would be graduating soon. Master Cliff, what do you plan to do when you graduate? I don't know. My grandfather back at home hasn't sent any word, but I would like to return home at least once. I want to tell him that I got married and that I have a child now. It'll be lonely without you. According to Rudius' predictions, Cliff's return to Milis would mark another showdown with the man god. Of course, that was only conjecture on his part. This is the third time that he's done this? And I had to go back and read it because I'm like, I don't remember it ever implying really anything around Cliff. Now, yes, Orsted at some point had insinuated that there is a plot that he sees in that future diary that implies that there is this point coming up. Like, and I wish that he would just ask Orsted and Orsted would tell him. Orsted has figured out that something in that there is a turning point, essentially, in that book, in that diary. And it's implying something is coming up. Hasn't come to effect yet. And I think Rudius might be drawing the conclusion based on looking at that himself and going, okay, so what is Orsted seeing that I'm not seeing? And he's going through it and he's going, well, the whole thing at Milis was a pretty crazy moment. But again, my perspective, I'm like, but what would imply that? Because they went there, they stole a book, they got out, and Cliff died? What in there had anything to do with the man god? And so I'm constantly trying to figure this out as Rudius keeps bringing this up. This has got to be a showdown. It's got to be a showdown. It's got to mark one. But again, he's saying conjecture. But I wish you would explain what that conjecture is. What is Rudius seeing that this is something? Is it Rudius being paranoid and just letting man god go rent free in his head? Or is this Refugian sort of cheesily overly tipping his hand? It's come to the point now where I'm like, I hope that he either explains with the current information rather than it be suddenly, okay, now suddenly we're in the middle of a showdown in Millis, and now Rudius goes, this is exactly what I thought. Because I think it's tilting its hand too much, because I don't see it. Now, yeah, you can assume that Cliff dying might be somehow strongly tied in with Rudius, and thus he knows that the idea of Cliff dying could be a goal of the man god. I don't quite see it. I don't see it based on future Rudius. I see it based on Rudius now because Cliff has gotten so involved with him and building up the suit and everything like that. But I don't see it with the old Rudius. I don't see it with that. Oldius, I guess you want to say it. So it's very interesting. Again, I can see it just based on the idea that everything is sort of pointed at... I can see it personally because I know the story of Cliff, which Cliff could have told Rudius, and thus he could see the same thing I'm seeing. That obviously there is a big, massive power shift happening in Millis. And it could be this is a sign that it has already happened. Cliff saying that I have not... grandfather has not sent back any word can imply that he's dead. And that was my assumption based on Oldius's diary. That when they got... Because that was one of the things I think I was actually asking about that when we were going through that segment. Is when Rudius got there, they went there to get the tome to find out how to do the detoxification magic for Roxy. And then in the diary, and I double-checked this, when they got there was no mention of his grandfather. Because I'm thinking, well, why would they have to sneak in? I mean, Cliff's grandfather is literally the Pope. So he's got power, unless he no longer has power, or he dead. Or it could just be more of the idea that there's a lot of these systems where the Pope isn't like absolute power, and there could be like a whole council and everything like that he has to go through, and those people are saying, hell no, I don't care if this is your son, or he could be not wanting them to know that he's his son, grandson or whatever, son, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying. I know this ex is actually his grandfather, his parents are dead, he adopted him, all that kind of stuff. But anyways, again, it didn't imply at all in the diary, if I remember correctly, that Cliff utilized his connections with his grandfather. It didn't even talk about it. So my assumption there is that either the grandfather lost his power or is dead. I would assume that Rudius would have wrote that, though. Cliff came back to me, he was upset because his grandfather's dead. He can't help us out with that, so we gotta sneak in. It didn't even talk about it at all, which was interesting. So yeah, here's kind of solidifying that thought process for me, that I think he's gone. That's why he's not receiving word. Or he's just being very careful because the battle's currently happening, and he knows if he sends word to Cliff right now, they'll find out where Cliff is at. Or somebody's watching him, and he doesn't want to get word out. But again, my assumption is that, yes, what I was getting to earlier, my assumption is that, yes, Millis is going to be a pinnacle point. Is it going to be for the man god? I don't know. But it is going to be a pinnacle point, no matter what, because it's already set up that there is a battle happening right now there's two factions. There's probably more than two factions, but there's two major factions in my mind right now. One is like the pro demons, and one is like the anti-demons. And that was kind of one of the things they were, clarifying that there's like a difference there. And yes, the whole thing with the blessed child, and yes, the current pope, all that stuff. They're trying to assassinate her. There is a power struggle happening, and it's an eventuality that it's probably going to happen. And I sadly have no doubt that Rudius is going to get involved somehow. It could happen without him, because this story has had plenty of times where Rudius is not the main character. He doesn't have to be involved with everything. But it's most likely that seems like it's been it's been like hinted at for so long. I think he has to get involved just for the story to have some sort of, I don't know, some effect there. Anyways, it'll be lonely without you. That's a way off. Yeah, true. After arriving at Shariah's southern gate, Rudius paid the driver, and they set out on foot. Heading southeast, they came to the company office. It was surprisingly large, and jutted out conspicuously on the outskirts of the city. A fence surrounded it, warding off people. You know, I kind of realized that at that time too, but you were really lying back then. Well, yes, it didn't seem like anything I said would convince you to believe me about his curse. It's not that I'm blaming you. That curse of his is really strong, even now. I mean, look at me. My legs are trembling. Reese unlocked the front door that was labeled Employees Prohibited Beyond This Point. They passed through an unused reception area that he constructed just in case. Opening the next door, Cliff shrank back, eyes fixed on Orsted, who was sitting at a desk. As per usual, his expression was terrifying.
So it's you, Cliff Grimoire.
Grimoire? 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 Cliff Grimoire? Cliff Grimoire? I never touched the quotes, and so I completely didn't notice this. Cliff Grimoire. I thought it was Grimoire. So it's you, Cliff Grimoire. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's Grimoire. I have always remembered it being Grimoire. I even have it in my other notes as Grimoire, so I'm assuming it's Grimoire. But apparently Orsted thinks it's Grimoire.
So it's you, Cliff Grimoire.
Yes, that's right. It's me.
It must be difficult for you each time.
What are you implying? He obviously meant meeting him face to face purely at Rudy's request. Sir Orsted, let's take care of this quickly. We brought you 3 today.
Very well.
After depositing the 3 boxes on the desk, Orsted pulled out a full-faced helmet from one. There was one in each one, colored black, brown, and gray. After Cliff requested, Orsted silently placed his head inside the helmet. Rudy thought he looked suspicious wearing it. Just helmet, no armor. Actually, he found it more terrifying than usual. Well, Master Cliff, how is it? No good. Worse, in fact. All right, let's try the next one. They tried each one in order, checking Cliff's reaction every time, trying to ascertain if they had any effect at all. Once done, Cliff shared his opinion. The 3rd one is the best. I tried using the flak method on the first one to transform his mana, but that completely backfired. That means it's highly possible that your mana itself carries the curse. His very mana is cursed? Yes, the moment Orsted's, that is, Sir Orsted's mana enters someone's line of sight, the curse activates. That's how it seems to me. Then maybe we can find something that covers his entire body and prevents any of his mana from escaping? Certainly, if he trapped him in a box with no openings whatsoever, then his curse probably won't activate. But that doesn't really solve anything. Fair point. This past year, they conducted experiments using information that Cliff had already put together based on Ellen-Lace's curse. That was how they managed to identify his head as the main source of the curse. Thus, Cliff developed a helmet-shaped magical implement. They've been trying each of them and using Cliff's reaction as a sign of efficiency. Their research bore some fruit, having the latest soften the effect of the curse, albeit marginally. Many children and animals would still run in terror, but it was enough to soften Sylphie and Edis's attitude towards him. It's like, when I read this, I'm like, okay, at least he didn't create a sumo wrestler's underwear to stick on top of his head. It's just like this big, like, I don't know, it sort of like mentions it almost like a deep diving helmet that you can't see through it, just like this thing that just covers it completely. But yeah, that's very interesting. Noting the idea that the mana itself leaving his head activates when somebody sees it. The activating thing's the weird part, because again, how they've kind of, at least for cursed blessed children, it's always been sort of a disturbance in the mana. The mana itself is disturbed, and it creates some sort of anomaly inside the person, whether it be like a massive amount of strength or thirstiness, yada, yada, yada. But this seems to be like particularly a curse that is coming from his head that is activating when people see it. So it's not really, it's for me anyways, and I might be misremembering, for me anyways, it sort of is implying that his curse is not quite, it's not the same as like a cursed child or a blessed child. And I think Cliff is possibly picking up on that and realizing that it's not going to work the same way as it works for somebody like Ellen-Lace. But it's still good. And it does seem like Cliff is getting something out of this. He's getting knowledge out of this that is actually beneficial to him. He's seeing that, okay, I have this knowledge about how I handled Ellen-Lace's curse and how her mana works down here, and I'm going to try to do the same thing in applying to stop this curse, which makes people hate him. So I'm going to just to basically take the same concept and stick it right on top of his head. Stick these underwear on his head and see what happens. But then he's already seeing that it's seemingly something that's coming out of his face, which, yeah, it can technically be applied to the idea of how he looks. He always looks terrifying, and that's literally the mana coming from his face and upsetting people. But this does technically confirm the theory that I had, that they've kind of hinted at for a while now, that it takes somebody seeing him to have that fear, to have that terror, to have that distrust. It's not simply just the existence of Orsted. And yes, they technically imply that when they were in Asura, that yes, Orsted was kind of sneaking around and going different places. but they still sensed when he was getting close. That's the interesting thing. Some people were sensing that something was coming. And it could just be that people were sensing something more than other people, but it wasn't necessarily the curse. But again, a lot of that could be those that sensed him coming were those that have experienced him before. Because again, the whole situation when they were doing the summoning of the sacred beast, it was like this lineup of the girls, and you had the ones that had seen him before are like, can we trust this? And the ones that had never seen him before going, we could trust Rudy. I mean, why would you guys not trust Rudy? He knows what he's doing. He wouldn't put us in harm's way. Let's get on with it. Again, it kind of plays in that idea of having to actually see that mana, seemingly, that they're saying now, this mana that's coming off of him that activates and makes you terrified of him. Again, it's a very interesting kind of twist to what we've seen with all the curses and whatnot. And I think I would probably wonder if it's more contributed to Rejerd. And the idea that people had a fear and a hatred for Rejerd, and it had to do with Laplace's curse that was applied upon them. But yeah, it is kind of nice that if we can get this at least softened, then I can no longer have everybody constantly upset at me for following Orsted. Rather than hating them as if he personally killed their parents, they would just now have a level of disgust one felt towards a loathsome boss. Not ideal, but enough for them to realize that he was really plagued by a curse. That's the other interesting thing there. To at least have them trust when you say, this is not his fault. It is this curse that's doing that to you. He's not, again, it's that whole idea that it can't trust him. He's deceiving you. You can't trust him. Oh, it's the curse that's causing me to think this. So you can trust him, ? And that the reason that Rudius was working for him was because it didn't affect him at all. It was during the course of the research that Cliff finally realized the nature of the curse, and why Rudius had lied to him and Zenoba previously. That marked an important step forward. His feelings towards Orsted was still complicated, but at least he was making do at this point. See, Cliff has already done that. Cliff has finally been able to, during this course, disconnect that and realize mentally and physically, okay, these are two different things. There's Orsted and then there's this curse. Whereas I think everybody else has them together. They had a long way to go. The helmet was roughly twice the size of Orsted's head, had no ventilation. You couldn't hear or speak at all. You can't see. Yeah, kind of annoying little. It's just like a big, massive, like I don't know, like a big foam ball that you just stick your head into. Still, Cliff was a genius to develop something in a mere span of a year. Soon, someday, Orsted would be able to walk around the city and wave at people. Cliff was pleased about the arrangement too. Researching another person's curse provided him with more data to free Elise from hers, so he's getting a benefit from it. And again, I think that's all about having... I think a lot of what Cliff is doing with this whole situation with the cursed mana and whatnot, just the disturbance of the mana, is really understanding how the flow of mana works, how that disturbance works, and knowing how to undo it. Like, it is really setting up Cliff to being somebody that could literally, throughout the world, help people with all these problems. And it does make me kind of wonder if Cliff could ever create something for Nanahoshi. They hinted at it before. They're like, Cliff is doing this thing with Elise. Let's see if he can figure out something for Nanahoshi. But they kind of side it. They put it aside because they had to focus on, we gotta save her now. They had her like in stasis and everything like that. They have to figure something out now. They can't wait and then, wake her up and then try something and put her back to sleep. So I'm curious if they ever went back to that, to figure out something there. But I guess maybe they figured the leaves are enough. We don't need it anymore because she got the leaves. You don't need an implement for it. It was only unfortunate that he would eventually return to that research once things calmed down and Elise wasn't so busy looking after their child. Though Rudy didn't see a problem with leaving her curse be for the moment. That way they can go straight to making a second child. Not everybody's trying to pump them out like crazy, Rudius. Like, assumes that you need to make some more, right? All right, we'll come back in a month.
Very well. You really are going out of your way for me, Cliff Grimoire. I never imagined you held such talent.
Huh? Oh, right. Yeah, I'm a genius after all, aren't I? Orsted was shocked by what Cliff's research had accomplished. In many, many loops he had lived, he'd sometimes tried doing something about his curse. That's interesting. But after several years of testing to no avail, he'd more or less given up. Perhaps in these 200 years he'd lived on continuous repeat, there had been others besides Cliff doing research on it, but they wouldn't align themselves with Orsted. The important thing was that they had produced results. The next time Orsted went on a loop, he could now find a way to convince Cliff to research his curse. Stopping here. The next line is, while on that subject, Rudius wondered if he'd even be in said loop. Orsted had said that he wasn't in the previous loops. So yeah, okay, let's play a scenario here. So, cut forward, they don't kill the man god. And Orsted's still alive, and he resets, because I still have this prediction that I think Orsted's going to die, and it's going to force Rudius to have to handle the man god by himself. But Orsted goes forward, and he gets that ending point. He ran out of time, reset back loop. There's a couple things here. One is that the question mark's going to still remain, will Rudius even be in that next time loop? Because in the previous one, the actual Rudius of that world, they're theorizing, died. And it was only because Rudius' soul came from another world and into that body that the actual child itself survived. He just replaced the soul that was leaving it, and his new soul was able to contain the Laplace's aspect that possibly killed the previous child. So that's the only reason that Rudius is in this one, because we have no indication that Rudius remembers anything from previous loops. Now that's a question mark there, is that if Rudius did, but he maybe died anyways. Maybe him going into that child of Rudius, he still died. And that's why he wasn't ever active in the previous loops. But the assumption here is that every loop, it's only just been Rudius himself, and he just dies. But now, with this one, Rudius comes in, the Rudius of our world, we don't know what his name is, comes in here and replaces the Rudius of this world, and is born. And that's the anomaly that Orsted is going to be facing once he gets to this particular period in time. So yes, if theoretically they fail or whatever, Orsted resets again, and they come to this point, and he comes up to their house and goes, yeah, kid's dead. So that guy didn't come over this world again. So I don't have this Rudius character this time. The child itself has died. Okay, let's go to Cliff and see if he can help me do this research again. Cliff ain't going to know who the hell he is. He's going to be terrified of him. He ain't going to even know what this whole implement thing is. Rudius got Cliff into researching these implements. And it's probably due to Rudius that Cliff even met Elise to even try to research this stuff. So I don't see why he thinks, well, he can find Cliff again to research this again. Cliff ain't gonna know. The only reason Cliff knows is I think a lot of what Cliff knows in this whole stuff is, yes, it got kickstarted by Rudius saying, hey, try to figure this thing out. But it was also kickstarted by the idea that Rudius implement kind of injected a lot of thought processes that Cliff never thought about, and everybody doesn't think about. It was a lot of his research took off because Rudius was mentioning the idea of Rejered and the spears and the curse. That's what really tipped him off in that direction. But again, would he even make Elise is the big problem there, and I don't think he would, because Elise was only there because Rudius was there. That's the only reason that Cliff met her. And if he never met her and fell in love with her, there's no reason for him to ever research this stuff. So none of it kind of plays out well. So that's the unfortunate thing. Now the question mark would be if when the research happens, does Orsted keep anything? I wouldn't think so, because they imply this idea of sort of their soul being kind of kicked around. But again, he was sent to that time period, so he was physically moved there, unless he was placed into the body of another dragon folk. That could be as well, but yeah, interesting. If he does move with his stuff, then yeah, he can take whatever implement they put together and take it with him, but I don't think that's the case. It could be. But yeah, that is an interesting question, though. If that reset happens, would Rudius be there? And I don't think he would. I think he's just placed specifically in this timeline, and my theory on that was because at some point, the man god or somebody figured out that Orsted was doing this, and he inject Rudius into this little bracket of time amongst thousands and thousands of years, this little timeline that Orsted is in, just to stop him, throwing a wrench in there. Or it could just be simply causing the displacement incident to destroy something, and Rudius just got involved with it. It could just be simply that Rudius and Nanahoshi were placed in that period of time as an after effect of causing the displacement incident that I think, again, the man god caused. While in thought, Orsted called it to Rudius. Cliff had already left, all too eager to distance himself from Orsted and his curse. No matter how much he reasoned the curse's effect, his body was convinced he was an enemy. Sort of how a human knows cockroaches hold no power to kill them, but still act terrified when they spot them.
Rudius, I appreciate this.
Being thanked like that made Rudius grin ear to ear. Mr. CEO really knew how to flatter a person. It made Rudius want to go window shopping with him after they finished the anti-curse helmet. A city date with Orsted. They are actually definitely lining this up and shipping Rudius with Orsted. No need to thank me. It's emotionally draining to keep this up with my entire family opposing it. Also, if you're able to go around as you please, it'll get under the man god's skin more. I'm only doing this for my own benefit.
As you say.
After the CEO was cured, Orsted Corporation would rise to a world-class business. With that in mind, Rudius took his leave. There is definitely something to be said about what this actually means to Orsted, and this is kind of goes in line with what I was talking about with Lucy. When Rudius brought Lucy over, how he seemed like he was happy. And again, I think that is partly to do with what made Orsted initially ally himself with Rudius. Why he gave Rudius that option. Here's somebody that doesn't look at me terrified, and he's kind of powerful. And that would be a great asset to me, especially after I just wasted a bunch of mana. And yeah, seeing how he does care for his family enough to stand up against somebody like him. All these variables putting into place sort of humanizing Orsted, which I really like. And in humanizing Orsted and seeing in all these interactions and seeing how much this has to do with the curse itself. And even with Rudius, who's not affected by the curse seemingly, he still sees this terrifying face, which I think might still be a projection of the curse. It's just not affecting Rudius like it does anybody else. I think Rudius is still, something is still visibly happening to Rudius, not maybe physically. But still, it's like, you do have to kind of take into consideration how many loops this person has gone through. Pretty much it is their entire life. Their entire life has been spent with people fearing them, hating him, being disgusted by him, hating his guts. And now there's a sign that I can actually walk in those cities. Again, remembering how long this is, now there's a chance that I can walk into those cities and people aren't screaming. I can see what they do. I can see their daily lives. I can see what happens in this store. I can talk to this person. I can see what's going through this person's mind. Again, this is somebody that I joked about, the idea of like walking up to save somebody in a forest who's being like killed by like a wolf. Like a wolf is shedding their chest, getting down in their chest, it's ripping away their flesh, getting inside their guts. And then suddenly Orsted walks by and they're so terrified of them, they might tell them, no, don't worry, I'm fine. Just pass by. I can't trust you. That kind of bad. Being able to finally have all people, give him a chance, give him an ear, just open a conversation with him. Like Rudius was kind of mentioning, walking around the city and waving to people and then waving back. It's got to be something that deep inside Ors is going, wow, I can finally no longer be isolated. I can finally meet people. I can finally talk to people. Those people that I save in order for them to, work against the man god later on, those people that I saved will no longer look at me in terror. They'll look at me in appreciation. It kind of goes back, it goes exactly to what I was talking about with Rudius last Mushoku Monday. The idea of the villain, the idea that everybody makes Rudius out to be the villain. And that can be something that can mentally affect somebody. That after a while, you can either choose to, well, if I'm going to be called the villain, I might as well wear that badge and wear it proudly. I'm going to be the bad guy? Fine then. I'll be the bad guy. I've actually had that mentality with certain things. Not like viciously or violently, but I've had those feelings of like, okay, I'm going to be the bad guy anyways. I might as well be the bad guy. If that takes the situation to go away, let's do it. Whatever. I'm the bad guy. Move on. But it's just like that situation where, yes, I acknowledge that Rudius is literally, to a lot of people, a walking nuclear bomb. They're just waiting for him to explode because they've seen it, they've witnessed it, they know about it, they've heard about it, and that's what terrifies them. Death. He looks like death. And I think Orsted is the insane version of that. That literally everybody, almost everybody, fears and hates and loathes and doesn't trust him. So, yeah, it kind of extends from what I was talking about last week. Looping to the back of the house, Rudius slipped into an armory, pulling out his miniature magic armor. It was completely black and in 3 parts. Arms, legs, torso. They look lightweight, but due to being shaped by earth magic, they were incredibly heavy. Slipping them on and injecting mana into them, it made them easier to move around in. Following this, Cliff and Rudius went back to the university. Zenoba was next on his list to visit. It was a bit of a pain to commute back and forth between the office, but they had no choice there. Upon arriving at the university, they decided to have lunch together with Zenoba after Cliff dropped off the helmets. When Rudius arrived at Zenoba's research room, he paused before opening. This is a little bit of a unfortunate moment. In the past, he was reckless and was forced to bear witness to Zenoba's perversions. It was awkward for both of them. As a man who learned from his past mistakes, he knocked this time. Knock, knock. Anyone there?
Oh, master. What miraculous timing. Please, come in.
Opening the door, he found a geeky-looking 30-year-old man and a naked 10-year-old girl. The girl's face contorted in pain as she cradled her stomach, blood trickling between her legs. Oh my, this is a crime scene. I, unfortunately, immediately kind of had an idea where they were going with this. Zenoba, how could you? You put your hands on Julie?
This is no time for jokes, Master. Please, use your healing magic on Julie. The bleeding won't stop.
Rudius assumed it was some sort of accident. Julie glanced at him, eyes bleary and tear-filled. Grandmaster, my stomach hurts so badly. Please, help me. Rudius wasn't a doctor, but he inspected her, driven by the pleas. Seeing no external injuries, he assumed it was internal. The blood was coming from down below. The smell was almost nauseating. There was no mistaking it. It's likely her period, right? Your best bet would be to call Miss Ginger.
Pardon? Oh, now I understand. Yes. Come to think of it, Julie is a lady.
That's the unfortunate thing. That's the unfortunate thing that I kind of felt super bad about. This is one of those situations where it's like, nobody's on the same page, really, is what it is. This is just Discovery in general.
My mind must be failing, that I didn't even imagine that possibility.
Zenoba chuckled to himself as Julie glanced worriedly. Master. Julie was already 9, maybe 10 now. Either way, it seemed awfully soon for her period, but perhaps that was normal for dwarves. Then again, perhaps the traders had mistaken her age. Not that it mattered.
But before we worry about that, we should eat lunch. Julie, you may rest for the day. Will you be all right by yourself, lying here until Ginger returns?
I'm sorry. I'm scared. Master, I want you to stay with me. Rudius thought to himself, oh, what is this, Zen? Sure are popular, ain't you? Cheeky little rascal. After shrugging, Rudius spoke up. Well, that works too. I can go buy some stuff for us. We can eat here. I honestly don't get that. I honestly don't get this part. It's almost like Rudius turning, like, I guess, obliviousness into, like, perversion. Like, he's turning it into like oh, look at you, Zenoba. She wants you to stay with her. And it's like, I don't really see that. It's just again, it kind of goes in that whole thing of like a father-daughter thing. Again, Zenoba he's starting to get certain things, but he's still oblivious. Like, this guy is still somebody that, not oblivious, he thinks different. That's always been Zenoba. He sees things differently. He thinks about things differently. His priorities are very focused. This is the thing that I want. I want these dolls. I want these figures. I want these statues. I want art. And that's what I'm focused on. And everything else around him is, yes, he's connecting to. Because, yeah, like, he's super connected to Rudius. And it seems like he's taking very good care of Julie and looking out for her and everything like that. Yes, he still snaps and does stupid things, like the whole thing with Ginger. Like, just snaps. But again, that was an aspect of, like, seeing a lot of pride and care for Rudius. He was upset by what she said about him. Or the fact that she spoke negatively against Rudius for not speaking properly to Zenoba. Is that whole thing. There's like a cause and effect there. But yeah, I don't see Zenoba having any sort of connection to Julie like Rudius is kind of implying here. It's just that Julie has attached herself to Zenoba, obviously. This is this person that's been taking care of me. He's done well to take care of me. He feeds me. He teaches me all these things. He's my master. He's the one that's taking me from a very dark place. Remember, she was in a very dark place and given her life, given her a place to stay, and taking care of her, food on the table. But yeah, I do find this to be like one of those very awkward situations where, because of what I mentioned earlier, where Zenoba doesn't think things through the way that other people do. He doesn't acknowledge things. It does seem like he's panicking here, which is a cool thing to see. He is going, crap, Julie is bleeding and I don't know what to do. And he was probably spending a long time trying to figure out what's going on. She's in pain, and she's bleeding, and I don't know what to do. I can't make it stop. It just keeps going, and what do I do? And then Rudius shows up and then goes, oh, well, it's this thing. Oh, yeah, that's what that is. And it's funny right there. He says, oh, that's right. She is a female. And he does kind of mention the idea is because I wasn't thinking straight. Like, he's in a panic mode. He doesn't know what to do. And it kind of goes in two different favors. One is the idea of, like, just almost like parental discovery. Like, he's a guy. He's never been through that himself. I would hope not. I wouldn't think so. He's a guy. He hasn't been through that himself. And so he doesn't seem to know what it is. But it does seem like he does, but he just didn't really kind of put that connection together. But additionally, it's the other side of, yes, his obliviousness and to not see things the same way that other people do and not really kind of connecting that for himself. So it's kind of a two aspect here of like parentalness and discovery, and yeah, the fact that he's never gone through it. He's having to kind of connect things himself at the moment. But there is the other idea here that Ruiz is pointing out, that there's two variables. One could be, is she even that age? What is her actual age? I would assume at this point that they would be able to find out. Like somebody around them would have knowledge of dwarves and go, no, she's actually probably around this age. Like he insinuates, the possibility that they could technically have that start sooner. That the point in which it would start might be a little bit different. There's a lot of variables there that could insinuate that, they don't have the full idea of either Julie's age or when something like this would affect her. But yeah, I feel super bad for Julie because she's literally in this room with two guys that just have no clue what the hell they're doing. And then you have Zenoba, again, not seeing things the same way that other people do, literally going, oh, let's go eat first. You're fine, right, Julie? And like, no, she's literally crouching over in pain. This girl is scared. She's assuming she didn't have anything before this. This is her first time. She is terrified. This is something that she has. I would hope that Ginger would have explained something like this before, but in some cases, this conversation doesn't come up until it actually happens. But it is kind of sad that she is afraid. She thinks that something is broken inside of her and that she might die. She's in pain and she's scared. And Zenoba's like, let's go get some rice balls. Come on, master. You'll be fine, right, Julie? Go lay down. It's like, smack, Zenoba. Chill out, dude. But again, that's Zenoba. That's our boy Zenoba. He just doesn't see things right sometimes. So Julie was already a woman. Bruce planned to wait until she reached adulthood before putting his plans into action. But he noticed recently that her total mana pool has stopped growing. There's the other signification that, yes, she's going past that period of that growth that they were talking about before. That's why they wanted to get her so young. They wanted to get a young one just because they wanted that mana pool to be expandable. After leaving, Ruiz met with Cliff, got some food, and returned. While eating, Ginger was close by, seeing to Julie. At this point, she was more of a maid than a knight. They considered moving rooms to give Julie space, but she insisted to remain close by because she was anxious. So sad. Poor girl. Poor girl. Again, she's probably terrified.
Master, how's the magic armor doing?
Not bad. I was able to stop a monster's attack with it. Although, I still feel like its performance is a little unreliable. It may be fine against a beast, but it'd be rough going up against a swordsman in that thing. I would assume he would try it against, well, yeah. Never mind. I assume that he tried against Edis. Oh, that's right, she's pregnant. He doesn't want to make her do things like, she'd probably be willing to. Let's be perfectly honest. She'd be like, yeah, sure, let's do it. But no. Oh, stop.
Indeed, you're sacrificing defense, mobility, and your own self-regeneration power in the process.
But to achieve the same level of capability as the prototype, we need to make it bigger. They made several versions of it in the past 6 months. At first, they tried to replicate all the functions in compact form, but it didn't turn out too well. Not too surprising. The first one employed cutting-edge technology at their disposal. This included a number of mysterious techniques the man gods shared with them. Trying to duplicate the original meant that they weren't going to reduce its size. Sure, they made something slightly smaller, but it costed functionality and defeated the point. From there, they went trial and error, resulting in annulling the magic circles they drew on the torso. They kept the magic circles concentrated on the arms and legs instead, fashioning them so they extend from the shoulder for the arm pieces and the groin for the legs. With that, they successfully cut down the size and the mana cost, although it should be noted that it was still a mana guzzler that only Ruiz was able to wear. With that, they succeeded in creating version 2, which consisted only in arms and leg pieces, but forced them to put a power limit on them. Since the chest piece would not have the mana channel through it, the legs and arm pieces would be torn off if they went full throttle with his magic power. It wasn't like they weren't being held down by anything. It was a shame the suit had such high functionality, but could only wield power equivalent to advanced swordsmen. That's why they decided to add a new torso piece, with supplementing magic circles that would prevent arms and legs from being torn off. This led to the current incarnation of the armor, improved version 2. Its power rivaled that of a Saint tier swordsman. That's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy. Ideally, Rudius wanted something more powerful than that, but they were still far off from it. But I think the thing to remember here is that he's in wearing that suit, and it gives him the power to rival a Saint tier swordsman. It doesn't take away from the fact that he's also all these other things with magic. So he's a Saint tier swordsman that can use all these, like, yes, again, King tier levels of magic. Ideals were always beyond one's fingertips. The world never worked the way you want it to. There's also the fact that you sort of always want to be in a position in some cases where you're always striving for that next step. And even if you do achieve that next step, you want the next step. So you should never want to be satisfied. I think satisfied is good in a lot of cases, but for certain things, it's not good to just kind of settle, I guess is the best way to put it. Eventually, Rudius wanted to craft a suit Cliff could wear as well. Again, I think he's going back on that thing that he knows that something's coming with Cliff, and he wants to prepare Cliff. He wants Cliff to go back to his homeland with a mecha suit. Well, I guess there's no real choice but to keep using this and improve as we go. Agreed. Cliff nodded in agreement.
That said, Master, what about the Gatling gun? How is it?
That thing is a smidge too lethal, so I think usability is a bit limited. Rudius put a lot into his weaponry. He had one of Roxy's acquaintances craft a Gatling gun for him. In accordance to Orsted's advice, the design was simplified, altering it to discharge roughly 10 stone cannons nearly simultaneously, almost like five-finger flare spells from Dragon Quest, except not as badass, and more like a shotgun. The Gatling gun was one of the countermeasures against the Water God style. According to Orsted, the Water God style was based around brushing off an opponent's magic. Since the shotgun fired each round almost instantaneously, with minimum lag between, it was highly effective. The strategy wouldn't work against a king tier or higher, but it was quite useful otherwise, save its length and lack of maneuverability. That's an interesting thing. Again, they kind of described it as being like this big like pipe that he had in his hand. And again, from a perspective of calling it a shotgun or whatever, kind of implied this idea of a literal shotgun with like these barrels and whatnot. But it's kind of implying this idea that it's literally shooting 10 of these stone cannons simultaneously. And the thought process of, well, it won't work against king tier or higher. Because yes, the idea for a water god style, which is all around the idea of like, again, counters and deflections or whatever, the idea that you would think is that shooting a single stone cannon, they'd be ready for it and they would counter it, they would block it, they would parry it, slice it out of the air, whatever. Which I think they've implied that a lot of swordsmen can do, is the idea of deflecting or whatever. Even like way back there, Paul deflecting Sylphie's attack. So they can deflect a magic attack. But seemingly this is specifically for the Water God style because they're so good at it. And the idea here is that I can just shoot 10 of these things instantaneously at somebody, and it might counter that skill level, that ability to do that. But he's even here saying king tier or higher, probably not going to work. But king tier that's a high tier. But it still makes you wonder, like, how would they know? Would they be prepared for something like that? As I guess the question mark. They might know by sight that it's some type of magical implement, that they've been around the block a few times. They know these things can kind of do things that whatever's crafted in there, and I might not know what it is. But it's still kind of interesting to note that they would be ready for that. Reese tried all kinds of things, but nothing gave him the solid leap and power he wanted. He continued to dedicate himself to physical training and magic practice. But since he had a job, he wasn't home often. That made it difficult to find extra time for training. He could only rack his brain for better ideas. He'd only faced small fries lately. But there was no telling when the next powerful opponent might appear. He didn't care if whatever attack he came up with was a one-hit wonder that would be useless afterwards. But he needed something that could take down a person in one shot. And again, I think it goes back to the idea of catching him off guard. That's literally what's been Rudius. That's literally what has saved Rudius so many times, is that people just don't know like what he does. I mean, even with Orsted, the first time he scarred Orsted, he literally was like, "What the hell? That actually worked? Like, what did you use on me?" And again, it was a lot of curiosity there. Rudius always kind of catches people off guard with like the oddities that he creates. He thinks outside of what most people in this world deem as logic, is the main key thing there. Kind of think of it. Zenoba, how's it going with the automata?
That research has been on pause. Part of it was because I have hit a plateau, but I've also been prioritizing the research that will ensure your survival, Master.
Oh, well, sorry about that. Zenoba's putting him first.
I am enjoying the process of creating the magic armor as well. There's nothing for you to apologize for. If anything, I should be the one thanking you.
Zenoba was rapping lightly on his armor with his fist. He was a stand-up guy. Oh yeah, Zenoba, since Julie is a woman now, I think it's about time we kick off our plan to sell the picture books and figurines. You think you're up for it? The picture books were key in Rudius' plan to improving the Superge tribe reputation. The first was already pretty much complete. Unbeknownst to him, Zenoba had already bought the dyes to produce the painted figurine. Rudius had a few nitpicks, such as the saturation of the hair not being enough, the cream color of the spear being a bit too strong, and the skin color being too bright. But those were inconsequential. He had left the prototype on a shelf at the head of his bed, which resulted in Roxy screaming bloody murder when she woke up to discover it one morning. After Norn heard about this, she stole it and took it to her own room. So it's pretty obvious that, yeah, people recognize it as a bird. If Norn stole it and Roxy's scream bloody murder seems like it's doing what it needs to do, that's enough, right? You see Norn sneaking in there, still away from the Reserved figurine. It's so cute. She still loves Reserved. Well, she's doing the picture book, so that makes sense. The picture book came out nicely as well. Norn pinned the text, while Zenova was in charge of the art. Finally answering that question, neither were particularly talented, but the work was unique. I was very curious. I knew that Norn was writing it. I was curious who drew the pictures, and it seemed like Zenova did. I did not know that he was artistically inclined in that direction. I mean, he's making the figurines and stuff like that and chiseling things, obviously, but I didn't know that he was like good at drawing. Neither were particularly talented, but the work was unique, with a sort of soft touch that children were fond of. They included a chart for learning how to read the letters in the back of the book, so it could double as a textbook. Reese hoped that it would be less likely to be thrown out if it served a practical purpose. Yeah, that was kind of what I was talking about in the previous Mushoku Monday when I started talking about that. I was like, that's actually a really good idea there. Now all they had to do was make the block prints and mass produce it, calling it by hand afterwards. Their work lacked professionalism and standardization of printing press, but it wasn't so bad since most of the books in this world were made by hand anyhow. Yeah, pretty much.
That will be a bit difficult.
Zenova was frowning. The cost?
No, we have plenty of funds as it is, and Princess Ariel is providing additional financial backing. I have received word that she has already set up a workshop in Ashur Kingdom as well, so there is no problem on the production front. The issue lies in the cells themselves. We have no connections to any merchants.
Ah, that part. Come to think of it, Reese hadn't considered who they'd actually have sell them. He considered opening up his own shop and doing it himself, but given the current circumstances, that wasn't going to happen. They needed a salesperson, someone to peddle their merch. He couldn't think of anyone in their circle with necessary business acumen. Nanahoshi? I don't know. Silent 7-star? I mean, I know where the joke obviously goes to, but my mind, when I read that, I'm like, Silent 7-star? Now, it didn't imply that she did it herself. She made the connections. So she has tons of connections to people that can sell it. Now, they could be implying the idea that she has disconnected herself from all that stuff at some point, like she just gave it up and stopped messing with it because she achieved part of her goal. But I don't think she did that because I think she still needs those resources, that she still has this stuff going in the background. But yeah, she could easily connect Rudy's up to somebody. I wonder if we'd be better off seeing if Ariel can introduce us to someone.
Her Highness does appear to be quite busy lately. Her coronation isn't far off. I don't think it would be wise to trouble her when she has so much on her plate.
True. And putting ourselves... Zenoba's going to be the one to correct him there. True. And putting ourselves further in debt with her wouldn't do us any favors either. Reese thought maybe we should put that plan on hold for now. It wasn't like they were in a hurry. They could wait until Julie was legally an adult. Basically, 5 years. Yeah, I think doing all this because in her period is kind of a little bit trying to jump the gun there. Zenova, do you think it's possible to teach Julie the fundamentals of business in the next 5 years?
Possibly, yes. But I feel she'd best served as a craftsman. If we want someone to serve as a merchant for us, we should consider buying a different slave for that.
Reese thought, a different one? It would be best to find someone who is already invested in business. It would be great if they were popular with the people and skilled at marketing. There was one just like that. No, actually, they didn't. There was no way he could leave this business to that derpy cat who got scammed. It was better to just buy someone new for the job. Yeah, here we go. Reese is like, yeah, let's just keep the controversy going. I don't care, but it's like all I can think about is, yeah, let's keep the controversy going, Rudy. Thank you. Which, yeah, this goes into stuff that I don't think this stuff doesn't get adapted for sure. I think we should iron out the details of our plan before we set anything in motion.
Agreed.
Reese didn't want to be hasty, as it would only lead to failure. He'd been taking his own sweet time up until now, so there was no problem with another decade to get everything together. Leaving that topic for another time, they moved on to work on improving the magic armor instead. Zenova Hardy had a vision in his mind for the next version. Following their meal, they continued their meeting before parting ways. The magic armor's performance was slowly improving. As the sun began to set, Reese dropped by the staff room to pay respects to Vice Principal Genius. He found Roxy working there and hovered over her, only for her to lose her temper and drive him out in the hallway. He was dejected, hunched over in the hallway when Norn strolled by. Having come to return the key to the student council room, they decided to walk home together, the three of them, for the first time in a long time. Norn, was there anything in today's lessons that you didn't understand? No, I didn't have any problems, Miss Roxy. Your lessons are easy to comprehend, as ever. Reese had noticed the two of them becoming awfully close without him even realizing. Gone was the awkwardness that used to hang between them. Their lively conversation warmed his heart the whole way home. Yeah, I think Norn and Roxy has like a special circumstances that, yes, obviously Roxy being her teacher, they get to spend a lot of time together, and there's something that technically Roxy is providing for her. And again, that initial conflict that Norn and Roxy had was really around, I thought, a lot to do with what Norn was going through with the loss of her father. that was feeding into her frustrations with what Rudius was doing with Roxy and Sylvie. So it was just kind of because those circumstances sort of just played out the way that it did, it just caused that initial conflict. I don't think initially Norn has any issue with Roxy as herself. I'm trying to be careful so that it's all easy to digest, but please tell me if there's anything that doesn't make sense. If that happens, I hope you'll take the time to teach me personally. Roxy chuckled. I charge a lot for private tutoring, you know. Arriving back home, Rudius called out to Lilia and Zenith in the garden, watching the sunset together. We're back. Welcome back, everyone. Zenith was silent. At this point, not changing much. For better or for worse, her condition seemed stable. He wondered if her memories were really gone forever. He hadn't discovered anything to help her, and was so busy with other things that he really couldn't look into the matter in earnest. Recently, Lilia and Sylphie have been trying some method of their own, but to no avail. Oof. Again, stop bringing up Zenith. Every time they bring it up, nothing changes, and I don't like it. Yeah, we've kind of gotten to that a couple times here recently, that idea of the stability, but at the same time, that sadness of it not getting better. Having that improvement, and then suddenly it just stops. But it is actually cool to see that both Lilia and Sylphie are trying to work something out. I would assume this entire time, Lilia has been trying things. I think ever since, you know, Zenith was first saved, I think Lilia, whenever she can, has probably been trying things to help her out. And obviously it's probably been absolutely wrecking her. I can't imagine. Again, it's one of those cases where everybody, when dealing with something like this, that's so like impactful to your life and the person that you love so dearly, everybody's handling it differently. They all see it differently. Paul would be reacting to Zenith's issue right now completely different than what Rudius is doing. Because again, Rudius has his own family and not as much of a connection to Zenith as Paul does. Paul absolutely loved her. Rudius has only recently discovered that he has care for her. And so there's a difference there in how they handle it. And Lilia, additionally, is going to see Zenith completely different. This is the sister wives. They love each other. They're literally wives. Paul was just the third wheel for a while there. And I can see like this being very rough for Lilia. But I know because it's so rough for Lilia that she's probably been trying a lot of things with Zenith. But now since Sylphie is no longer working for Ariel, and she's now basically become, you know, a at-home mom, she has that time as well to focus on it as well. And I do love seeing that she has joined, presumably, again, assuming that Lilia has been trying things, has joined Lilia in trying out new methods of trying to see if they can help them. And I think that a lot of that has to do with, yes, they care for Zenith. Again, Lilia loves Zenith. And I can see that Sylphie has some sort of care for Zenith. She spent a lot of time with Zenith when she was a child. So she does probably see Zenith as probably being like a second mom. But we've never really kind of got into details about that, so I'm on assumptions here. But yeah, there's going to be, even if that's not the case, Sylphie's going to be wanting to do it for Rudius, obviously. This is something that's probably weighing heavily on my husband's heart. I need to fix this. Let's see if we can figure out ways of doing this. So I like that she's spending that time to do that. So at least even if Rudius can't, you know, focus on that, they can. And there's a good chance that while Rudius is constantly going, I don't have time to spend doing this, and I want to do this, but I don't have time to do this. I keep having to put it off. Sorry, Dad, I can't focus on this. I know it probably makes you angry, but I can't do that. I don't have the time for it. I have to focus on protecting my family. That's the first and foremost thing for me. At least there's a chance that when he comes home one of these times, Zenith and Sylphie has figured something out. We got it. We figured it out. She's getting better. We've figured out a way of doing this. They can focus on it. When obviously Sylphie and Lilia is not focusing on everybody else. Announcing his arrival again once inside the house, Sylphie came shuffling out to greet them all. His beautiful wife was wearing an apron, and Lucy tottering behind her. When she spotted Norn, she scrambled over and tackled her. Nornie, welcome home. Lucy, I'm glad to be home. Nornie and Lucy are best as friends. Norn swept Lucy up in her arms and stroked her head. It was obvious how much Lucy liked Norn by the way that she beamed up at her. But the moment her eyes met Rudius, she hid in Norn's shadow. Ouch. Again, ouch. Norn, did we plan to have you stay with us today? Nope, but I heard about Linnea coming here to stay, so I decided to come take a look. That. The circumstances are a bit complicated. Rudy basically saved her. As Sylphie sighed to herself, Rudius couldn't help but wonder what that was for. Is he adding another to his harem? I'm not sure about that. As wild as she seems, Linnea does seem to be pretty fond of Rudy, and she's pretty erotic. They were talking as if he was going to put his hands on Linnea. Admittedly, she was quite voluptuous and appealing. He'd be lying if he said that he didn't want to take a midnight tumble and wrestle her in bed. That was a different matter, though. He was a man of reason, after all, not entirely ruled by his carnal desires. I mean, to give Rudius some credit here, yeah, technically the only times that he does kind of slip into that issue is in the face of tragedy. So he does control himself outside of that. What did Miss Etta say about all this? She wasn't against it? Norn tilted her head. She claimed ownership over Linnea and refused to hand her over to Rudy. Ah, so that's it. Sylphie, where is Edis? Taking Leo for a walk. I kept telling her that she's pregnant and that she should give it a rest, but she won't listen to me. Seems like every afternoon, I look out and see her practicing with her sword again. I understand that she's past the precarious stage of her pregnancy, but what is she going to do if she causes herself a miscarry? Edis was the same as always. Reese only wished that she kept jumping and leaping to a minimum. She was certainly strong, but the baby inside her wasn't. It made him worry if she can actually safely carry it to terms. That's the sad thing there, and I don't know they'll go this route, but it would be extremely sad if, yes, if this ends up being the first case of Rudius losing a child. And why that hurts so much is, yes, let's be perfectly clear, with every one of them, Sylphie, Roxy, Edis, any one of them losing a child is going to be, like, devastating. Like, I can't even imagine it. My mother went through that. I can't even imagine it. The idea of carrying a child that long, being so excited, and then losing it. It not being able to see the world and grow up and be that child. It's heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. With Sylphie, a lot of it at the time of her pregnancy, a lot of it was, I need to have this child for Rudy. He wants this. There was never like a signification that she wanted it. But yes, I can assume, because it wasn't really kind of vocalized that much, I can assume that when she finally had the child, she was happy, and she would have been very upset. But I think if she lost the child, she'd be more upset because she'd be failing Rudius. That's, again, my assumption. With Roxy, again, at her pregnancy, it was, it's not yours. It's mine too. So there was a lot of attachment there that Roxy had to the child as well. With Edis, again, it's similar to Sylphie. That this is my job. I have to have this child, and they have child already, so I have to create an heir. Like, she wants to create a boy. I want to do this for Rudy. This is for Rudy. And so, more so with Edis, I don't know if she will have a actual attachment to the child personally, that this is my child, but more so that this is a legacy that I made with Rudy. That's what it's about. But I think because of how long she has tried to get it, just like Sylphie as well, because of how long it took her to finally have that child and being so happy about it, I think it would destroy her if she lost it. Again, each one of them are probably going to be devastated in their own way, and I can't even imagine what that feels like. But this is right now concerning me, that Edis might be the first person that actually loses the child. And it's because she keeps pushing herself. And she will only have herself to blame. That's the sad thing. She's only going to have herself to blame. Or we'll find out that all this work that she's doing is going to insanely superpower and fuse the child with like this massively powerful battle aura. It comes out and is literally grabbing people and throwing them around at the point that it's actually born. Aisha called out from the top of the stairs. "Oh, welcome home, everyone. You guys have to see this." She turned around and beckoned to someone. A woman stepped up the railing, wearing the same maid outfit as Aisha's. She came down the stairs and stopped at the landing to spin in a circle. Her skirt danced through the air, giving Rudius a brief glimpse of her thick calves. The girl then posed like a grab-your model. Literally, a cat maid. "I made some adjustments to some of Mother's old clothes and made an outfit for Miss Linnea. What do you think? Cute, isn't it?" It was definitely cute. So Aisha made that by hand. She claimed it was a used outfit, but it looked like brand new. "Why put off to tomorrow what we can do today? I'm gonna have her work her tail off." "Yes'm, ready for duty, yeah. Let's start with cooking." They're putting her to work. She started it. Petite little Aisha led Linnea off in the march. The two of them in high spirits, they filed past them and began preparations in the kitchen. It was kind of entertaining to see Aisha so pumped up. She finally has an underling. She's always been under Lilia, and now she's got an underling. Norn spoke up. "Miss Linnea sure does seem like in high spirits. I figure she'd be much more depressed about being reduced to a slave." Reese figured that was because Linnea was an idiot. It's like swallowing something piping hot. It burns, but once it's down your hatch, you forget that it felt like magma on your tongue. After that, the whole family sat together for a meal for the first time in a while. Reese even got to bathe with Edis when she was finished, to see how big her belly had gotten. Before it grew late, Sylphie and Rudius tucked Lucy in bed. He gave magic lessons to Aisha and Norn after their bath. Then he stopped by Lilia for a brief talk about Zenith's future, spending the entire time watching Roxy as she breastfed Lada. It was a satisfying day. Starting tomorrow, he would spend every day training for a while. Gotta work hard. Yeah, reverse a little bit here. Back there with the whole thing with Linnea. And it's obvious, it seems like that's something they're hitting heavily on chapter 5 is, that is one of those cool things. It's just like with Zenoba. Is that assumption that, oh, Zenoba is just dumb. And not really so much realizing it's not that Zenoba's dumb, he just doesn't tick the same way other people do. He sees things differently. He's special in a way that he doesn't see things the same way we do. And I think that's going to end up being Linnea. I think what Refugian right here is setting up, and it's getting into it seemingly more in chapter 5, at least what Rudius might be implying is the case here. Something's clicking in Rudius's head, and at the same time as it is for me, maybe we're not seeing, maybe we're not giving Linnea enough credit. Is that she is extremely filled with anxiety right now. She doesn't show it, she's hiding it, or maybe she just doesn't understand or how to express it, but she's not doing well right now. And something is breaking in her. And it's one of those moments where you go, oh, this is funny. Linnea's the maid, the cute cat girl maid. Haha, thing's funny. Harem, Edis wants into better. Hot cat girl. This is so much fun. And then underneath it all, possibly, Refugian's cooking something to where suddenly Linnea snaps. And you realize, oh, that's right. Linnea's a person. And she messed up over here. And she got tied in with all this stuff. And yes, Rudius saved her. But it doesn't change the fact that her life is broken. Again, we're going to get into it a bit here with chapter 5. So I'm gonna hold off. I'm going to start getting into it now. Chapter 5, Signs of a Family Falling Apart. Woof. 10 days passed. Rudius spent that time living out in the company office, training sunrise, sunset. When Orsted was around, he worked on building his stamina, did mock battles, and took lessons. He also made sure to clean his room before bed and organize documents. The cycle would continue over and over in this way. On days when Orsted wasn't around, he spent the whole day training. He would equip his magic armor and work on different forms Orsted taught him. Then he would contemplate different patterns of coordinated attacks. Sylphie would occasionally bring him lunch, and while she was around, he'd team up with her to see how the attacks played out. She wasn't there this day though. The forms Orsted taught him were the one that dragon god Udupin had developed and left behind 400 years ago. He was known as one of the 3 god slayers, which also made him one of Pedagus's comrades. According to Orsted, amongst all the dragon gods in history, Udupin had the smallest mana pool. He was the weakest of all the candidates for the title of dragon god at the time, and no one thought that he could manage to earn it. But it was Udupin who developed a whole new and unique dragon god style. With that, he was able to not only claim the title, but also play an integral part in Laplace's defeat. Udupin was still revered in modern times as the most prominent genius in history. His dragon god style involved using little mana and power as possible to corner an opponent. Orsted managed to locate the book of his secrets he left behind, teaching himself Udupin's fighting style and the quintessential technique, Holy Dragon Aura. That's crazy. That's crazy. The Holy Dragon Aura was developed just a mere 400 years ago, or at least was left behind 400 years ago. That was developed by Udupin himself. That's pretty crazy. And this makes perfect sense why Orsted's teaching him Udupin style. Because again, it's pointing out the idea that his whole style, his whole thing is developed around the fact that he did not have a lot of mana pool. And what's the whole concept here? It's using as little as possible because Rudius is using this armor. Since Rudius is using this armor, it's already using a lot of his mana. And he needs to conserve as much as possible. So it makes sense to use as little as possible in the use of this style. And then add on to that, pretty big shock that something as seemingly significant to Orsted's survival, the Holy Dragon Aura, was something that was developed by him as well. It's pretty cool stuff. It's like these cool little info bombs just out of nowhere in here. I love this stuff. As always, I love this stuff. The part about him not using mana wasn't very useful to Rudius. But the idea of pinning down an opponent with minimal effort was. That's what Rudius takes the perspective of right here, which I technically forgot about. But yes, I would more take it as that Orsted might be teaching him this because of the fact of his armor. That it's already using quite a bit, so you need to supplement, you need to offset that use of mana with your armor by doing this. You have yourself a massive mana pool, you have an armor that's giving you a battle aura, but that armor is taking away some of your mana, so you need to offset that by using very little effort here. But yes, Rudius is obviously going to jump to the conclusion, I don't care that I'm using a lot of mana, I have lots of it. But I think Orsted might be teaching him it to not use mana. And it could be Orsted kind of just, that's what he's used to. He's always been using this stuff because of that aspect. I could see Orsted finding everything that Udupin learned as being very valuable to him because of his
the slowing effect of his mana regeneration. And again, if Orst is going to teach Rudeus how to fight, this is second nature to him because he's been probably focusing on using that style and what Urupin used for a long time. It's second nature to him, and he knows how to use it in combat very well because he's probably been using a lot. Plus, his style of weaving martial arts and magic in close combat suited him and his magic armor. There, now he acknowledges it. Today's plan included mentally stimulating coordinated attacks again. First, Stone Cannon. With a direct hit, it was capable of injuring Orsted. Its potency was staggering, on the same level as a Sword of Light. That made it the natural linchpin of his coordinated attacks. Next was Quagmire. Used so many times, it was his fastest to conjure. Locking a charging opponent, it served as a good point to go on the offense. Electric took a bit more time to conjure than Quagmire, but it was highly effective since it could pierce through a battle aura and paralyze them. There was many times where Electric would work, where Quagmire was ineffective. It was best to couple them, use Electric, then Quagmire. Once rooted in place, he could use Deep Mist or Frost Nova to throw them off balance. Stone Cannon was generally more than enough for pure offense. The rest of his spells were for stopping the opponent in their tracks and limiting their movement. No matter what it took, he had to make them drop their defenses, evasion, and deflection. Then it was a matter of finishing them off with Stone Cannon. Pulling that off in order, victory was his. Or so Orsted assured him. At least Orsted is agreeing with it because I'm still kind of stuck on relying too heavily on one thing. But again, it's one of those aspects of Stone Cannon works. Why would you change it? Why change what already works? But I think he's doing well in sort of diversifying outside of that. Yeah, we've established Stone Cannon is really great. It's super OP, and everybody's acknowledged how OP it is. But his problem has always been not thinking outside of that. Other possibilities, basically. To recap, use Quagmire, enemy makes the move, use magic to respond, next move, respond with magic again, pin them down, hit him with a Stone Cannon. Talking about it was easy enough. Main issue was some swordsmen could cut through mana and magic alike. There was no guarantee he would get the drop every time. It was highly likely any supplementary magic he tried would be ineffective. Orsted had taught him some spells above King Tier for different elemental schools. He hadn't accomplished much with that knowledge though. Most offensive spells above King Tier apparently consisted of arranging a combination of spells from Saint Tier or below. Yeah, he knew that with what Roxy was teaching him. It was Cumulal Nimbus and something else, I forget. Like Absolute Zero. You just had to increase the speed and potency of Frost, which itself was a combination of Water Cascade and Icicle Field. Absolute Zero let you skip drenching the opponent and freezing the area in an instant. He could already use Absolute Zero and already acquired spells up to Emperor Tier. That was why Batagati said that he could call himself an Imperial Earth Mage when he's seen as Stone Cannon. Ordinarily, there was no way to increase the potency of Stone Cannon, but in theory, it could be strengthened using the same process of combining spells like Absolute Zero. This is once again one of those cases where I feel like it goes out of its way to sort of point out how absolutely useless titles are. Because it's one of those things of like, but it's just combining these two things, which is a feat in itself. And it was kind of observed with how Roxy could like literally only show them once. Like her mana pull, like she was drained. And even with Sylphie, like she tried it a couple times and then she was drained. It's one of those cases where it's like, yeah, all it's doing is combining these two things, but in combining those two things, sometimes that's a lot of mana to use up, and a lot of people can't pull it off. So it almost turns into like a thing where, once again, it feels like Refugian, through Rudeus, is showing that these are just titles. It doesn't really mean much. It's just combining these two things, but it's not actually useful in some cases. Since he already learned up to Saint Tier magical spells in each 4 offensive schools, one could say he already mastered all there was to master. As for God Tier spells, he probably wouldn't end up using them anyways. Apparently, you need an enormous amount of mana and extremely fine control over mana, in addition to using an insanely long incantation and magic circle to control the spell. As Orsted told it, the potency of these spells was such that it could change the landscape. I'm sure at some point we gotta use one. At some point we either gotta use one or we gotta see one. Not to say that the displacement incident wasn't a God tier spell. Or divine? Is it God or divine? Are we going to God or divine? I hate how these like 5 different ways this is translated. I don't mind it so much, honestly. I know it bugs some people. I don't really care. I've kind of made the mental connections in my head because I've seen it jump back and forth so much. Some of the strangest geographical features in the world were actually a result of such magic. Frankly, Rudeus was still pretty crappy when it came to drawing magic circles, and didn't see a point in using magic on such a grand scale. Solid foundations, practical experience, and combined magic. Those are the 3 things that he needed. It does make me kind of think of like recent conversations around like Ariel getting on the throne and stuff like that and running magic to be in that area, that maybe there's a possibility that they need a really big spell. But I don't know about finding somebody that has God tier magic because of that. Or should return while he was immersed in his magic training. Rudeus immediately greeted him. It was an employee's duty to properly bow and greet a CEO. Having only one employee probably felt a little desolate to him. But they had to hang tight until Cliff concluded his research. They'd eventually hire more employees, and Ruiz would have them all bow in unison. It didn't matter if they called his company shady as a result. He's so stuck on this company stuff. He's so excited that he finally has a job. He's just turning it into a job. When Ruiz first started bowing and acting all polite, Orsted commanded him to act normal. But he had grown used to this antics at this point. Orsted's like, stop. And then at some point he's just like, whatever. He's going to keep doing it.
We have work. You'll leave in 3 days. I'll explain the details to you now.
It would be my pleasure to carry out this mission for you, sir.
As usual, it's not a particularly challenging job, but you should say your goodbyes to your family before you depart.
Yes, sir. That's interesting. Like, Orsted's going out of his way to tell him to say goodbye. He's like being considerate to the idea that you might not make it alive, I think is what he's kind of implying there. And so Ruiz returned home for a little while. At the door, he was greeted by a cat girl maid, sitting with her legs tucked beneath her. Did she mess up or something? Yes, nice to be back, Linnea. But what in the world are you doing out here? Well, I made a teeny bit screw up, so I'm out here reflecting on my mistakes. Her ears sagged, looking depressed as she sounded. So that's it. If she was busy thinking about what she had done, it was best to leave her be. Ruiz made his way into the house. I'm home. Lucy peeked out from the shadow of the door leading to the living room. He assumed she'd run for it, but instead, she darted towards him and latched to his leg. Yes. I feel so happy for him. Finally, Lucy runs up to him. Daddy, welcome home. He couldn't understand why she was happy to see him back today. That's right, I'm home, Lucy. Reaching down to lift her up, she suddenly darted behind him, clutching his robe. She was being awfully affectionate today. Daddy couldn't be happier. Mommy, Daddy's home. Yes, I heard you. Hold on a second. Sylphie's voice echoed from the bathroom. Mommy! Sylphie must have been busy cleaning or washing clothes. Lucy grew tired of waiting and scampered off to the bathroom. Unsure what this is all about, he figured there was no point in overthinking it. Children would be children. He was the one chasing for her attention, so she may have decided to be considerate and indulge for once. I think she's a little scared. There's some tension, so she's probably a little scared. But yeah, she could be finally deciding to be considerate to him. Or maybe him chasing off the big, evil, mean, baldy guy was actually a good thing. Wandering aimlessly, Rudius noticed Lara and Leo together in the living room. Lara seemed in good health today. In the kitchen, Lilia was preparing the next meal, face heavy with exhaustion. Miss Lilia, I'm back. Welcome home, my lord. Are you feeling fatigued? No. Her face looked a bit paler than normal, despite her denial. I think maybe you should rest. It's nothing for you to worry about. Are you sure? Yes. He wouldn't push her, but it made him worry that she was overworked. If you're feeling physically unwell, please don't hesitate to take a break. I appreciate your concern, but I'm truly fine. Yeah, she don't show much emotion. Of course, I think this entire house and family just sucks at showing emotion. He'd take her word for it, but if not physical, then perhaps mental exhaustion. In other words, anxiety. Did something happen? She paused for a moment before answering. A short while ago, Lady Edis left to go to school. Edis did? Why? She claimed that she was supposed to teach Lady Norn swordsmanship today. Edis was really a restless thing. Maybe she was aspiring to be an instructor. He wouldn't oppose that, but wished that she'd bring it in while she was pregnant. It was making him worry. Again, hitting on that whole thing of her possibly harming the child. My apologies. We all tried to stop her from leaving, but before we knew it, she was gone. Oh, it's okay. Thank you for trying. Edis wasn't the type to do what she was told anyways. No wonder Lilia was exhausted. He figured he'd have to have a word with Edis himself, though it was debatable whether she'd listen to anything he said. Sylphie was easily unlikely to get through to her, but Aisha was better than anyone at a persuasive argument. That reminds me, where's Aisha? Lilia forced a smile. She's in the garden. Aisha was indeed in the rear garden, sitting in the corner with her shoulders noticeably trembling. As strong as she was, she seemed oddly vulnerable right now. Aisha? Big brother, welcome home. Aisha glanced over her shoulder, her tone perfectly normal. She had no signs of sobbing at all, but she did immediately sigh. When I got to this part, my mind immediately went to Bite, but I'm like, she's not gonna be digging us. Bite's big now. I mean, they imply that Bite's big now. So I'm like, what would she be burying? Oof. He noticed that she had a shovel in her hand and was digging a hole. When he looked in the hole, he found a number of porcelain shards. He recognized the patterns on them. There was a cup panel there too. It was a fancy teacup that Aisha had bought a long time ago with her own allowance. As far as he knew, she was incredibly fond of that cup. She would use it whenever she had tea. She let him use it once before, wearing a happy grin on her face, as she declared, "You're the only person I'd let use this cup. See, doesn't drinking from a good cup make the tea that much better?" He didn't see the difference, but she did look happy, which made the tea quite tasty. But now, her beloved cup was shattered. We all know exactly who broke it. It's like we don't even need, there's no question who broke it. Hey, big brother. Her voice was low and threatening, like he'd never heard before. What is it? She was livid, fuming. with quiet rage. Did he do something wrong? He had no qualms with apologizing if need, but saying sorry when he didn't know what he did wrong was like pouring fuel on fire. Can we get rid of that cat? Sorry? As Rudius was briefly confused as to what cat she was referring to, Aisha shook her head. Oh, I guess it would be wrong to get rid of her. We could sell her to one of those slave traders. Or rather, Miss Edis's family. Judging by the way that they talked, her family would pay a high price for her, right? Maybe they won't give us 1,500 Austrian gold coins, but they'd give us at least half, right? Hold on, calm down. Let's have ourselves a seat, okay? Reese conjured a chair and motioned her to sit. She fished out a broken shard from the hole, threw it at his feet before plopping down the chair. It's like, look at it. Look at it. See that? It's not particularly expensive, mind you, but it's not something that you can get your hands on anymore. The person who made it died, and the shop that sold it went under. Well, anything like that could break eventually, you know? Reese conjured another chair and sat down in front of her. He was aiming to calm her down first. I know that. I'd hardly get that pissed off over a single broken cup. All right. Seemed Linnea broke the cup, which upset Aisha. She claimed she wasn't angry, but she was clearly fuming. It's just, I don't think that cat's cut out to be a maid in our house. When she tries to wash dishes, she breaks them. When she tries to clean the house, she shatters mirrors. When she tries to wash the laundry, she gets the sheets covered in fur. Everyone fails when they start out. Lenny may look a little rough around the edges, but she actually comes from a pretty noble family and has been kind of spoiled. Well, I should cut herself off. Perhaps she meant to argue that she hadn't made any mistakes starting out. Yeah, not perfect yourself starting out. When she was cleaning the living room, she nearly splashed water all over poor Lana. You know? She did what? How did that happen? She was cleaning someplace high up and carried a bucket of water in her hand, rag in the other. Then she somehow lost her balance and started to fall. Well, I guess it didn't end up being that big of a deal, though. Did that rat and cat not know how to clean? I like how he's all, like, understanding. And then when it comes to Lana, it's like, what the hell? That stupid cat. Now suddenly it's just against her. Thinking back, Rudius had gone to her dorm room once. It was quite the pigsty, as he remembered. Not that it was good that she did that, but I wouldn't protest her employment here over something so trivial. Miss Norn is even worse than that, and a slow learner to boot. Excuse you. No need to take pot shots at Norn. Pot shots? Well, it's not like I'm bad-mouthing her or anything. My point is, that cat isn't bad at learning things. Once she makes mistakes, she tends to not repeat it. But still, she breathed in a sigh. That furball won't apologize. That was certainly not good in Rudius's eyes. Whenever she makes mistakes, she doesn't act the least bit ashamed, and just says, "Nyahaha, my bad. I'll be more cautious next time, yeah." Trying to do Linnea's voice and Aisha at the same time. For what it was worth, that was probably Linnea's way of apologizing. But an apology doesn't carry much value unless the person receiving it is satisfied. Then your apology means nothing. I think that's like very massively true words right there. Is the idea that disconnect between, because some jobs that I've had to overlook some people, and there's always a case where like two people just don't work. Two employees just do not work together. They just clash heads all the time. And even in cases where I have like people that are above me that obviously clash heads. Anybody that you work with in a lot of cases, and yeah, kids, siblings, yada, 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 yada. Whenever you have these two people that just don't see eye to eye with things, and you're the one that's having to kind of work between them, and you see that this person is obviously, apologetic about what they did. And then you go to talk to this person, they're literally like, no, that person is not apologizing. They don't mean it. And you're like, no, I know the person. They're apologizing. You're just not seeing it. And yes, in a lot of cases, it's just the demeanor, how it's said. That's not good. You think so too, right? Reese would probably forgive Linnea, but Aisha was her boss. She needed to have a crystal clear understanding about that. So come on, big brother. Let's fire her. Please, I'm begging you. I can't take working with her anymore. It was rare to see Aisha speak so disparagingly of anyone. Her patience must be at a breaking point. Even so, nothing catastrophic had happened. The shattered cup was merely what pushed her over the edge. Each individual offense themselves were trivial. In the end, they piled up and made Aisha lose her patience. I get what you mean. Linnea does have a habit of getting carried away, and she has her shortcomings as well. Still, this must be a hard situation for her. She's probably only acting cheerful because she's trying desperately to acquaint herself with her new surroundings. Maybe that's why it looks like she doesn't feel ashamed at all of her mistakes. But you did say that she wasn't repeating the same screw-ups, right? That is a very telling sign right there. She's probably acting cheerful because she's trying desperately to acquaint herself with her new surroundings. It's like, you can probably equate that to like a, showing that uncomfortable chuckles, that kind of stuff. You hear that hesitancy in it. It's obviously a sign there that she is trying to laugh it off, trying to be happy to hide where she's actually scared and uncertain. Again, we're slowly creeping into that possibility that Linnea deep inside might be very upset and scared and sad that her life is done. It's like that whole thing like what Reese was talking about in those previous chapters. I forked over literally over a lifespan of time of money that she'll have to repay. According to her working in that house for a coin, yeah, it's going to take her literally over her entire life to pay that back. She literally, this is a prison. In a sense, this is a prison. This is her life. This is the rest of my life, is this house. Now, granted, yes, she got food. She's not shackled down. All of these other things. And yes, I don't even think Ruiz would chase her down if she ran. To be honest, truthful. I think if Linnea just walked out the door and left, Edis might chase after her. But that's for a different reason. I don't think Ruiz would chase after her. I really don't. And that's partly because he has a lot of other crap to worry about. But yeah, I don't think he'd chase her down. But yeah, again, I like that they're already kind of shifting this slowly towards, let's put aside the joke about the cat maid and actually get into the idea that she might just be completely full of anxiety right now. Reese figured Linnea was doing her best. People had a habit of making the same mistake, but it was possible to reduce the chances of that happening. That was the point of reflecting on one's actions. If Linnea hadn't repeated the same slip-ups, it was obvious that she was trying to improve. When he seen her at the front porch, she seemed genuinely thinking about what she had done. He got the impression she felt bad about it too. Nonsense. That furball probably doesn't feel the tiniest bit of remorse. I mean, her attitude is all weird to begin with. She acts super subservient to Roxy, Miss Edis, and Leo, but she's kind of cheeky when it comes to Miss Sylphie. Aisha's lips curled outward as she pouted. She sure could be stubborn. You think she has an attitude with Sylphie? I mean, she's way more casual with her than Miss Edis. And sometimes she calls her fits too. The two of them had spent some times at odds attending the university. In a way, they probably were a lot less formal with each other. Yeah, this kind of goes back to that whole thing. These two were constantly at each other. So obviously when it comes time to having to serve under her, she's going to act differently. And yeah, she's going to have the habit of calling her fits. She's... Again, most of the time, I would say 99.99999% of the time that she has ever spent with Sylphie, she was calling her Fitz because she was Fitz. And she was at the university and being Fitz. So of course she has the habit of calling her Fitz. That's probably because they've known each other for a long time. I hope that's really all it is. But ever since Linnea's arrival, the whole house has been weird. Now that she had mentioned it, they never had this kind of problem when Roxy and Edis came to stay. Yeah, that segment right there did kind of catch my eye, and the idea of like, I mean, yes, you can contribute it to the title of the chapter, but it does kind of imply that idea that something is rumbling in the house, that something is not right. I think this moment of him returning home, and you have Lenny out front, you have Aisha's out back burying her favorite cup, you have Sylphie's not rushing up there to greet Rudius. It seems like she might be troubled by this whole situation. You have Lilia, of all people, looks pale and exhausted. You have Edis running off. There's problems in this house. And that's something that we'd not really faced before. Literally never faced before. You had a little bit of tension when Edis was running around trying to find her place. And you had, Aisha there going, oh my gosh, you broke her favorite cupboard, or her favorite cutting board. How dare you? That was it. That wasn't bad. This feels like that something's going to come to a head. And it's almost a sad reality in the idea that you can probably suspect that they've been very patient with her. It's just not working. Which does lead me to believe that it's probably going to turn to a thing where Reese is going to eventually kick her out. Which sucks, sadly, for me. I like Linnea. But it is like that thing of like, this is a comfortable house. And now suddenly you have injected something that doesn't necessarily need to be there. Linnea does not need to be there. So if you're injecting this in there and it's not working and it's causing problems for everybody, you might as well just remove it. It doesn't need to be there. Anyway, I'll make sure that she apologizes properly if she messes up again. As for the things that she destroyed, we can add that to the debt that she owes. I'll also lecture her about fixing her attitude and acting like a proper maid. After I do that, would you be willing to give her a little bit longer to see how things play out? For me? Aisha grunted, lips gathered in a pout. She snapped her eyes shut and turned her head away. Seeing her act this way, he suspected that all she really wanted to do was vent her frustration, and her anger had all but subsided. Hey, come on, Aisha. I know she's a mess, but she's my friend. Well, I guess I can forgive her this one time for your sake. She hopped down on her feet, faced Rudius. But, big brother, even ignoring how I feel about the matter, things aren't going to end well if they keep up like this. Aisha then went back to the house. That was an ominous statement right there. Things aren't going to end well if they keep like this. And again, I think it's because Aisha's there the whole day. She's seeing how everybody's exhausted. This isn't going well. Reese made sure to give Linnea a thorough talking to after that. She gave him a yes or yeah, but it seemed a little too casual for his liking. He was hoping she took his word to heart. Later, when Edis returned home with Roxy, he warned her against intense exercises for a while. She folded her arms, frowning at him, huffing a, "I know that." He could tell this was an instance where she really didn't understand. At least she wasn't charging outside, brandishing her sword everywhere. Once her tummy and thighs grew a little bit bigger, she'd probably start taking it easy. That didn't stop him from worrying, though. He hoped the baby was hanging in there, having a father like him and a mom like Edis. He's even throwing himself in that pool, like, yeah, God, that poor kid's dealing with not just her, but me as well. We're so dysfunctional. I'm sorry, kiddo. We're weird parents. I'm sorry. But no, I think it makes more sense to me, obviously, for later on, but I do think there is something to her saying that she knows. Like, she is taking it easy. There is something that she's doing. And it kind of goes in that whole realm of, like, maybe she knows a lot more than they think she does. Or at least she knows how to limit herself. Maybe knows... I mean, they can go in the whole realm of possibly being able to control her battle aura in a way where it doesn't harm the child. I mean, who knows? Who knows about her capabilities and what her understanding of a child is? Again, it goes back to, like, it's similar to Linnea. It's that assumption that she's a dork and that she doesn't understand what she's doing, but she might actually know a lot more than you think that she knows. Lilia, I think, is the only person in that house that I think fully understands a child. She's bore a child. She's helped many other people bear and birth children. Everybody else is kind of secondhand information. Even Ruiz himself, I don't think, fully understands what a child can go through or not. So I'll be curious eventually if it gets into exactly what Edis is thinking about her routines. Maybe she has much more control over her body than most people know. Thanks to Aisha's sullen mood, dinner was unusually gloomy. When they finished their meal, Sylphie whispered to Rudius that Linnea hadn't got used to living there yet. She wore a guilty look as she felt responsible. There was no reason for her to. But perhaps because he was leaving the house in her care, she felt like it was her duty. As Aisha warned him, perhaps things were really heading in an unfortunate direction. He wondered if it would be best to step in and deal with it before his next assignment. Or, possibly, just stand by a little longer and watch it play out. I do like here that Sylphie I don't know. I really don't know. Again, what we do know from Sylphie's perspective at this point, reading to this very point right here, what we do know is that Sylphie's mindset is that I need to make sure this house and everybody in it is working together to ensure that Rudius does not have any stress upon him. He's doing his own thing, and it's obvious that he doesn't feel that he can have us be involved. He's protecting us, or that he feels that we'll get in the way, or he doesn't want to put us in danger, or he feels that we can't do it, yada, 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 yada. So we just need to make sure that when he's here, everybody is not giving him unneeded anxiety. We're not going to argue in front of him. We're not going to cause problems in front of him. We're going to make things clean. And I think with the whole thing with Ariel concluding, Sylphie's coming home now, and now she's more focused on it. Now she can devote herself to it. And so, yes, with this issue here, I think Sylphie, which, yes, back in the day, as fits, her and Linnea did not get along. And I mentioned this previously. Even though her and Linnea did not get along, the moment that she knew, Rudius saved his friend. Linnea is Rudius' friend. It's fine. Even if she might possibly hate Linnea, she's thinking, but it's his friend. And I'm not going to cause him any problems. I'm going to make sure this works. I'm going to make this work. And she even did it with the other girls. Even though, yeah, she wanted Rudius all to herself, she's going to work things out to make sure that Roxy's there comfortable, Edis is there comfortable, because she needs to make things work. All for the sake that Rudius doesn't have that additional issue. And even here, she's apologizing to Rudius by going, crap, I'm trying to make it work. I'm not getting my own feelings involved. And it could be that she doesn't really hate Linnea anymore. I'm to be perfectly honest. But she's trying to make things work. And now she feels upset because he obviously sees that things aren't going well. It's obvious that Aisha is upset, and it has something to do with Linnea. I wish I could make it work out, but it's not working out. Reese decided to sleep alone at night, since it was both Sylphie and Roxy's time of the month. It was honestly rough going without, after 10 days of training. Sinking the knees of his libido, or perhaps spurned by her own, Edis showed up before him. She had her arms crossed as usual, and despite normally wearing warmer pajamas lately, but today seemed to be a special occasion. We're doing it, she declared. No, we're not. Their baby was too precious, and there was a rule against not having sex when one was pregnant. But you want to, right? I already heard that Sylphie and Roxy can't do it. It's fine. I'll go without it today. You're my husband. There's no need for you to go without. She grabbed his hand and yanked him into the bedroom. He knew if things got started, it would be hard to stop them. Wait, Edis, let's stop. It's not good to do it when you're pregnant. We both regret it if you had a miscarriage or something. I absolutely can't take that. I mean it. I know that. That's why I've been watching myself this whole time. Watching herself? Going to school and walking the dog was watching herself? Sure, it was probably good to have some exercise, but still. Maybe it was just a matter of them having different ideas of what was appropriate. He thought maybe he was just being a worrywart. Again, I think there is something to be said there. Maybe she knows herself better. She knows her body better than they think they do. I don't know. It's an oddity. And again, it could be based on her knowledge of what was taught to her through, like, you know, Hilda and stuff like that. And again, there's a side of me that kind of thinks that it might be battle aura related. Like, maybe she's like possibly avoiding stretching certain muscles and stuff like that. And that's why, here, Edis dragged him to the bed and pulled back the blanket. Yeah. Linnea was underneath, lying in bed wearing something similar to Edis's nightgown, looking beguiling even as she curled her body inward. Oh, Edis, best girl. Edis, best girl. Hey, everybody's busy. Here, have a cat girl made. Girl knows how to give her boy what he needs. And it's so funny because there's so much in this little moment that's just, she thinks different. She just thinks different. If you can't have me, then have your way with Linnea. Yeah. Yeah. Linnea glanced up with a resigned determination, as if she'd given up fighting against this. The fabric of her outfit was so transparent, it gave her peaks of her chest. She had a tight waist, but proper muscles over the rest of her body, which made her legs nice and thick. Her cat eyes gleamed in the darkness. Rather than feel aroused by this, he was so dumbfounded that he gaped at Edis. What's going on here? I told you, Linnea. She wanted him to have sex with Linnea. Fez girl. Despite her affectations and nonchalance, she was actually quite a jealous one. She'd always pout when she caught Sylphie and him fussing over each other. But now that same girl was telling him to sleep with someone else? Edis, doesn't this kind of, count as cheating? It's not cheating, since she's a slave. That's what my grandfather and father always said. Besides, it's no secret since I'm right here, so there isn't a problem. Rudius wanted to scold both Saros and Philip. He'd ask Hilda for help. They taught her daughter some really weird and inappropriate things. There it is right there. Again, it's that aspect of that she totally sees us differently. It doesn't matter. That's what dad and grandfather used to do. It's like she's literally cucking herself. It's okay. I'll be watching. There ain't no way in hell she wouldn't jump in and get involved. Best girl. Linnea spoke up. Yeah, mommy, daddy, back in the great forest, your poor little girl has become a slave, and now she's gonna be a sex toy starting today, yeah? Linnea was muttering on her breath, saying some kind of prayer, so she wasn't willing after all. It was best to stop this. He couldn't let her be dragged into Edis's selfish whims. As for you, Pristina, I'll be leaving you in the dust, loser. Victory's mine this time, yeah? Suck it! And she, to this point, is still competing with Pristina. Well, maybe she's not so unwilling after all. Maybe it was okay if she consented then? Linnea, he stretched out his hand towards her. Linnea's whole body jumped. Yeah? She stiffened up, but didn't try to run. He slid his hand past her thighs to her tail. She had the kind of supple muscles that you'd expect from a carnivore, but she was soft in all the places a woman should be. His hand traveled up her back, feeling around her waist. It was tight and toned, tempting him. It's my first time. Go easy on me, nya. He didn't respond to her. It's scary if you don't say anything, nya. Nya, you know you wanna. Just kidding. Nya? He lifted her up princess style, made his way to the hallway, before unceremoniously dropping Linnea. Nya? Landing with a thump, he slammed the door in her face and locked it. There, now he could rest at ease. The evil was expunged. Hey, boss, aren't you being a little cold? He ignored the enticing monster cat in his house. His fidelity remained intact. Hey, Rudius, what are you doing? Edis, please don't get the wrong idea about me. The person I want in my bed is you. I don't need that cat. Really? If you're sure, then I guess. But I can't do it with you till the baby's born. Got it? Of course, I understand. Boss, open up. If you leave me out here like this, you're gonna leave my pride as a woman in tatters, yeah? Linnea beat on the door, but he ignored her. As far as he was concerned, she didn't exist. Linnea's voice grew louder. Boss, I'm begging you, yeah? I'm sick of Aisha picking on me constantly. Perhaps she and Aisha really did have clashing personalities for her to say something like that. Aisha had made that maid out for her only days earlier, and they seemed on good terms. Yeah, okay, first of all, I have to say, massive props to Rudius for turning that down. I do not feel that I would be as strong as he is, especially having my wife standing there literally saying, have it, it's fine. And she seems like she's like pretty happy about it. But it's still like one of those aspects like, dang. Again, I I give Rudy some more credit than he deserves. I mean, I still am upset that, yeah, he has cheated on his wives before. But it's still one of those things that it's always in a state that he is hurting. And somebody steps in and saves him. And then he jumps in on it. That he is a little bit more faithful than he gives himself credit for. Definitely, this is a big sign of that. But yeah, this is where we start to kind of unravel that, oh, that's the intention of Linnea. Again, showing the signs that it was something that she wanted to do, but it's sad why she's doing it. And it's getting into that aspect of what Linnea currently is going through, is that she is not happy. She's scared and she's not in a good position. She's trying to work her way up the food chain. Like a true beast folk, she's trying to work up the food chain. I want to be your lover at least so I can rise up the rank here, nya. I don't care if you use my body, nya. I'm begging you, boss. Please. I'm definitely not hoping to get pregnant with your baby so I can give birth and become your fourth wife, which would in turn completely erase all my debt I owe. Honestly, nya. It's like the evil villain that's like, so this, and this. So that's where the secret base is at. No, I didn't say that. But let me tell you about my plan before I take you out. So that was her plan. Then again, he couldn't really blame her for it. She owed a lot of money that would take more than a lifetime to pay back. Even so, he had no intentions of using her as a sex slave. It would be a lie to say that he had no interest in getting dirty, but Linnea was his friend. He wanted to stay friends. He already had 2 daughters, and after a conversation with Aisha, she would be livid if he slept with Linnea now. That's the key thing there. Because yes, Rudius should know more than anybody else, that's where Aisha wants to be. She's been thirsting for him ever since that whole thing with Sharon. She wants to be like her mother and fill in that same gap that her mother did with Paul. That's where she wants to be. And now a new maid shows up and immediately gets in bed with him. She'd be ticked. I think Aisha would storm out or do something really tragic. Ugh, that would not be good. That would not be good at all. And that could be partially why that could be one of those many things that is making her not like Linnea, is that she's trying to get in there. And everybody else keeps getting in that slot, and I'm still waiting to get in that slot. Roxy and Sylphie wouldn't be happy either. If he gave in to a momentary lust and cheated on them like this, that might cause their whole family to collapse. He couldn't let that happen. Some strength, man. To give up on having like a little moment with Edis and Linnea in a room together, dude got some strength. It seemed it managed to wake Lara. Now what? He contemplated opening the door, at least to shut her up. And the second that he hesitated over what to do, a door outside burst open. Hey, Linnea, do you have any idea what time it is right now? You woke up both Lucy and Lara. Nya, Fitz. I'm sorry, Nya. I didn't mean anything bad by it. Honest, Nya. My name isn't Fitz. It's Sylphie. Anyways, it's late, so keep it down. Yes'm. Sylphie's scolding was enough to silence Linnea. He could hear the reluctant thumping of her footsteps as she dragged herself away. It was probably safe to assume that she retreated to Edis's room, where she usually slept. Lara continued to cry for a short while after that, before quieting down. With that, silence fell over the house once more. He couldn't help but feel bad for Linnea. While it was part of his own fault, she was being kept like a pet, with no real way to work off what she owed. Her job performance was abysmal, and she was struggling to work with the head maid. With no other option, she opted to sell her body to her master in hopes that he'd take a liking to her, only to be rebuffed instead. For all he knew, she was crying into her pillow right now. An uneasy atmosphere settled over the house. This is kind of one of those like L moments for Rudius. Again, you were partly responsible for the situation. Mainly in the idea that yes, it's Linnea yelling and screaming, but it's like, if she's yelling and screaming in the house, stop her. She's going to wake somebody up. Instead, he lets her scream and scream and scream and ignores her. And it's comedic, obviously. It's a funny little moment because she's screaming and busting at the door saying, no, have my baby so that I can get out of this debt and all that kind of crap. It's funny in that regard. And he's in his mind doing this whole thing where he's like, no, she won't tip me. I'm going to ignore her. That evil, lustful beast out there, I'm not going to give in to it. But it's like one of those moments where, okay, the joke turns to the kids waking up, screaming, and Sylphie has to get up, wake up, get on to Linnea, tell Linnea to go to bed and keep it down. And then he just stays there. It's like, get up off your butt and go help Sylphie. There's moments where it's like, you have an opportunity to be a father and you don't do it. Your children are crying in the other room. It's your fault, partly your fault. Get off your butt and go help Sylphie. But no, Rudius just sits there. And Sylphie has to get up and tell Linnea to stop. and to go to bed and keep quiet. And I am assuming that Sylvie has to go back and deal with both Lada and Lucy. Rudius, get up. Go help. Explain it to Sylvie and help her with the babies. Like, why with how much Rudius complains that he doesn't have time to deal with the kids, it seems like he never wants to deal with them. I feel like, for me personally, I feel partially responsible, and I want to get up and go help her deal with the kids. And again, it's an opportunity to be with the kids. Help him out. Again, tell Sylvie what happened. You know, take care of Lada. Help him. Now, I'm assuming that, yes, maybe it doesn't really say which room the kids are in. They could be with Lilia. I would assume that Lilia, right now, it's probably Sylvie with both Lada and Lucy. I mean, Roxy could have one of them, but Sylvie could be taking care of both of them so that Roxy can get sleep because she's got work the next day. But again, Rudius, get up. Get off your butt and go help. You're responsible. There's times where it's kind of frustrating that he doesn't take any kind of proactive action when it comes to his kids. As much as he complains that he's not involved with them and that he doesn't spend enough time with them and that he doesn't get to be a father, you have a moment right here to be a father. Get up and go help. And again, you're partly responsible for it. It's a little frustrating. An uneasy atmosphere settled over the house. Aisha was gloomy. Lilia exhausted. Rudius heard Sylvie shout for the first time in a long time, and Lada was sobbing her eyes out. Maybe Edis's jaunt to school earlier and her attempt to have him have sex with Linnea was her way of dealing with the mood in the room. That's an interesting kind of point that he makes, and it's like, I guess, again, she does technically said it before that she's handling it in her own way. Yeah, he says right here, her actions made it clear that she didn't really understand how to handle what was going on, but she was trying to handle it in her own way. Again, to that point that she says earlier, what was the exact words? I know that I've been watching myself this whole time, that she has her own way of kind of handling the whole situation. But yes, I can kind of see her trying to handle the situation her own way by trying to get Linnea to fit into the same roles as possibly what Saros and Philip had their Beastfolk girls doing. Like, they might not have all been perfect, but at least they were able to fulfill that desire for their master, and that's how they were able to fit in the situation. Okay, Linnea is not working in this house. People are upset at her. Well, and Rudius might be in trouble with the situation as well, and he needs something, so I might as well give him this. That might help him get some tension off himself. He's got some built-up tension right now. This will fix it. She's trying to handle it in her own way, which is, yes, and seeing that this was a normal thing in her past house. I don't get how her going off to the university is part of this. Maybe Edis's jaunt to school earlier was her way of dealing with the mood in the room. Maybe feeling that her presence in that house when they're having issues with Linnea would help them. Or it technically, it technically can be, okay, they keep getting on to me about the fact that I'm exercising or that I'm going for a walk with Leo or that I'm swinging my sword outside. They keep getting on to me, and it looks like they're upset about it, so I'll just leave. Like, I can't make them understand that I'm fine, or she sees that she's fine. She understands herself as being fine. Whether that turns out to be the case or not is the question mark. Again, I'm kind of 50-50 right now. I'm more like 80-20. Like 20% chance that, yeah, she might lose it because she's pushing herself so hard, but I'm more 80% in the idea that she's probably controlling herself more than what people believe. And maybe she understands that she's fine. I don't know. It's an oddity there. But in her dealing with that frustration that other people are having, that she's doing the wrong, yeah, I could see her getting out of the room. She's causing everybody to be worried about her, and it's causing some anxiety. I'll just go leave. I can see her doing that. I can see her leaving because she doesn't want to push back and upset somebody. And then she sees that her actions are causing people stress. It's interesting. Regardless, tensions were growing. The worst part was that Linnea, the main culprit, didn't seem to realize that her attitude was the cause of it all. He always thought that she was a type who could read the room. Maybe she wasn't emotionally stable right now, given that she'd become a slave, was shouldering a debt, and barely escaped being sold off to strangers. If that was the case, it was his duty as the person that forked over the money to resolve this. Starting tomorrow, he'd look for a job that she could do that doesn't involve cleaning, laundry, or cooking. Yeah, that's that's chapter 5, by the way. That's an interesting thing. It's like the resolve for this. Again, I think this is one of those cases where who cares about the money? Just get rid of her. Just send her off. I don't know, send her back home. Send her somewhere where she won't screw up. And I think at this point we're establishing it might just be her going back home, which, yes, they kind of described as something they don't want. That was the whole thing between Linnea and Persimmon and why they had the duel, is they were trying to decide who would go back home. Because the other person who would lose was going to not go back home, because they knew whoever was not the leader was going to end up just being given to some random dude, and that was it. Their life was just, it sucked. So there was this idea of like, if I'm not going to become the queen, basically, I'm the tribe leader, I'm going to go find my own thing. I'm going to just not go back home. And so she probably doesn't want to go back home. But again, it was one of those things of like, at this point, if it's causing too much problem, I can see kind of letting it work itself out. Just give it a little bit longer, because it doesn't seem like they're giving this much of a time span here. I mean, it feels like this is a span of maybe 2 weeks at the most, because he gets there, he does his training for 10 days, and then it said like a couple days later after she made the outfit for her. So this isn't a long span of time here. So it hasn't given some time to sort of let things settle down. But at some point, yeah, I would probably just forget the money, just get out of here. Go. Do whatever you want to do. But I'm not going to spend money to save you next time, so don't screw up again. Or at least keep the contract that... I'm curious about that. He could keep the contract that she is his slave, but allow her to freedom. And if she does get captured again, can he go, well, I have the contract, she's my slave, she just ran away? Or would it be one of those situations where he would get at fault for anything that she did? There's some contracts like that. I think they have actually mentioned in this series, or maybe I'm thinking of a different series, that yeah, if your slave does something wrong, it falls upon you. Which that would kind of suck if she ran out there and did something else to get screwed up and then comes back to him. But yeah, there's a point where this is going to get turned into literally pushing her away. But yeah, I do like this. As much as I like to have Linnea around, I like to have that fun of Linnea, the cat girl, hot cat girl that's just being mischievous, all that fun regarding around the idea of a cat maid. But I do like having this kind of shift in the tone to this possible understory that yes, Linnea is not happy and she is full of anxiety and this is her life and she's not adjusting well, which is, let's face it, the case with any person put into forced servitude. Julie was the same case. Happy with her family, then just things go south and now suddenly she's in a cage and she's starving and she's dying. It's the same case. It's never, I think Vinland Saga did a really good way of showing that. We're living in a nice, peaceful village. Everybody's happy. We've cultivated our land. We're building back up. And then suddenly, now I'm standing in a line with a bunch of other people. And a guy is walking by and checking my teeth. And now I'm going to be sold off to a farm. And now I got to till the land for the rest of my life. Just like that. Nobody is going to adjust. So it's like Linnea not adjusting makes perfect sense. Nobody should adjust very easily. It's a sad state. I can't even imagine. One day you're with your family, the next day you have no freedom. It sucks. So I'll be curious to find out what Rudius finds that she can do that doesn't involve cleaning, laundry, cooking. Maybe just find a building or something that she can work out of that won't cause him problems that she can do elsewhere. Find somebody that will be willing to have her clean a stables or something every day. Who knows? Somewhere outside the house. And don't allow her back in the house to come by and, I don't know, get some rest and food. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, that's chapter 5. I'm going to cut off there. Thank you guys so much for dropping by for the premiere. Hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Monday. These were some long chapters once again. It feels like every chapter is long now. But yeah, maybe I should start condensing more. Just more condensing. We'll see. But yeah, again, thank you guys for dropping by for the premiere. Again, hey chat, hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Hey to everybody that drops by for the VOD later on. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. Hope you guys enjoyed as always. Again, greatly appreciate everybody that supports the channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. It means so much to me. It means the world to me that you guys are willing to part with your hard-earned money in order to make this happen. Keeps the lights on, keeps me down this road until we eventually come to its conclusion. But yeah, until the next Mushoku Mondays, you all have a fantastic week. Y'all take care. As for the things she destroyed, whenever she makes any mistakes, she doesn't act elite business. She doesn't act elite business. Wearing the same maid outfit is odd. But what is she going to do if she causes a miscarried? But what is she going to do if she causes herself a miscarry? It was during the course of the course. Gosh. Sneezy. But perhaps because he was leaving the house in her hair, but perhaps in her hair?